What if the ultimate ticket to business success isn't, a prestigious degree, but actually avoiding it at all costs?
Mm.
Like, what if the traditional MBA, the undisputed gold standard of corporate achievement for the last century, is actually a $150,000 trap?
It's a question that completely upends how we think about professional development, especially because, the narrative we are all fed from a very young age is that higher education is just the safest investment you could make.
Right, exactly. You put your time and money in, you get the diploma with the fancy Latin seal, and the world just sort of owes you a lucrative, stable career. You pay
Yeah.
the tuition, you get the corner office. It feels incredibly safe.
Oh, totally. It's the standard script.
But for anyone listening right now who is actually interested in business, entrepreneurship, or just, taking absolute control of your career, we are going to explore why traditional business schools might actively harm your finances and your trajectory.
Which is a bold claim, but the data really backs it up.
It really does. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack exactly why self-directed education isn't just a backup plan, but a vastly superior competitive advantage. If you have ever felt certification intimidation, that creeping imposter syndrome because you don't have a master's degree, you are about to be liberated.
The best place to start dismantling this mythology is by looking at what we call the delusion of grandeur.
The delusion of grandeur. I love that term.
Yeah, because when you strip away the ivy-covered brick walls, the manicured campus quads, and those glossy alumni brochures, MBA programs are selling a very specific, deeply seductive fantasy.
Right, the mahogany desk.
Exactly. You sign the loan documents, you endure some case study lectures for 2 years, attend a few networking happy hours, and magically you are granted that mahogany desk. You're making multi-million-dollar decisions in a glass skyscraper before, heading out to your yacht.
It's wild because it preys on such a natural human ambition. We all want status, right? We want respect, and we definitely want financial security. And the business schools position themselves as the sole gatekeepers to that life.
They absolutely do.
But from what I'm looking at in the research, they don't actually build the skills necessary to achieve that life. They're running a brilliant, almost invisible psychological trick on the corporate world.
Yeah, that trick is called the halo effect. And understanding how it works it's crucial because it explains how these institutions maintain their prestige despite a shocking lack of educational efficacy.
Break that down for us. How does the halo effect actually work in this context?
So the reality is that business schools do not create successful people. They act as a highly selective filter. Think about the admissions process for a top-tier program like Harvard, Stanford, or Wharton.
Sure, it's brutally competitive.
Brutally. And what are they filtering for? They are aggressively selecting for individuals who are already fiercely driven, highly intelligent, extraordinarily conscientious, and extremely ambitious.
So they are actively seeking out the exact demographic of people who would almost certainly conquer the business world, regardless of whether they ever set foot on a business school campus.
Precisely. They take these pre-vetted, high-achieving individuals, put them in a classroom for a couple of years, and then when those individuals inevitably go on to climb the corporate ladder or build successful companies, the school points at them and takes all the credit.
Oh, wow.
They shine this massive spotlight on the winners, which reinforces this halo of prestige around the institution itself.
So we look at a successful CEO and mistakenly assume the MBA forged them into a leader, rather than recognizing that their innate drive led them to both the MBA and the corner office.
Right, they correlate the degree with the success, ignoring the raw material they started with.
It's a masterful illusion. I mean, they are basically intercepting highly successful people on their way to the top and charging a toll to claim them as products of the university.
That is the perfect way to put it. It's a toll booth.
Yeah.
The toll they're charging is absolutely staggering.
The financial burden is where this delusion becomes, honestly, actively harmful. Because we are not talking about a small investment here.
Not at all.
According to the data reported by U.S. News and World Report, top-tier schools are charging $40,000 to $50,000 a year just for the base tuition.
And that is strictly the cost of sitting in the room.
Right. That doesn't account for rent in an expensive city, food, textbooks, and this is huge, the massive opportunity cost of not working for 2 years.
Yeah, giving up 2 years of a professional salary is a massive hit.
By the time you calculate the living expenses for a full-time program, you are staring down a price tag of $125,000 to $200,000.
That's an astronomical sum.
And furthermore, most people aren't starting with a clean slate. The numbers from Fine.org show the average undergraduate is already carrying $22,500 in debt. Yeah. So tacking an average MBA on top of that pushes the cumulative debt to nearly $42,000. Again, that is just the average. If you are chasing the real prestige of a top 10 program, you are basically mortgaging a house you don't even own yet.
And this amount of debt fundamentally alters the trajectory of a person's life. It has to.
How so?
Well, when you owe $150,000 to creditors, your options vanish. You can no longer afford to take a chance on a low-paying startup that you are deeply passionate about. You cannot afford to bootstrap your own company and survive those lean, zero-revenue early years.
Because you have a massive monthly bill due no matter what.
Exactly. You are instantly forced to chase the absolute highest-paying corporate jobs available solely to service your massive monthly loan payments. The credential you bought to gain freedom becomes the very instrument that traps you.
I hear that argument, and the debt load is undeniably terrifying. But, and let me play devil's advocate here, I find myself looking at the people who actually get into Harvard or Wharton. These are incredibly analytical, deeply rational people.
They are.
So they wouldn't take on $150,000 in debt if the math didn't guarantee a massive payoff down the line, right? Surely the return on investment is a mathematical certainty for those top-tier programs.
You know, it is entirely logical to assume that. Which is exactly why the actual data is so devastating to the traditional business school model.
Okay, tell me about the data.
To really answer your question about whether the math guarantees a payoff, we have to look at a landmark piece of research conducted by Jeffrey Pfeffer at Stanford University and Christina Fong at the University of Washington.
And Fong, right.
Yeah, and they didn't just look at a 5-year snapshot, which is what a lot of studies do. They analyzed 40 years of comprehensive data to test this exact hypothesis.
40 years of data. That is an incredibly robust sample size. What were the specific parameters they were looking at?
They wanted to isolate the actual value of the academic training itself. They reasoned that if the curriculum of an MBA program truly imparts valuable real-world business skills, then there should be a strong, quantifiable correlation between having the degree and long-term career success.
Meaning things like salary bumps and executive promotions.
Exactly. But more importantly, they hypothesized that if the content of the classes was the secret sauce, then the students who mastered that content, meaning they graduated with the highest grades, they should wildly outperform the students who barely scraped by.
That makes total sense. If the coursework is literally teaching you how to generate wealth and manage organizations, the people who get straight A's in those courses should be the best at generating wealth in the real world.
Right. It's basic logic.
Yeah.
But the conclusion they published sent absolute shockwaves through the academic community. They found absolutely zero correlation.
Wait, none at all.
None. There is zero correlation between possessing an MBA or achieving high grades in business courses and long-term career success.
That's wild.
Graduating at the top of your class with a perfect 4.0 GPA gave you no long-term statistical advantage over someone who graduated at the bottom of the class.
So the grades literally do not matter outside the building.
They don't. The academic training happening inside those buildings is completely decoupled from the real-world mechanics of managing and growing organizations.
That is mind-blowing. It means the entire academic premise, this idea that they are teaching you functional, translatable skills, is a mirage. You are paying for the brand name on the resume, not for applied competence.
Which brings us back to the halo effect we were talking about earlier.
Right, but let's dig into the specific financial return. Because even if the classes are disconnected from reality, does having that prestigious brand name force companies to pay you enough to justify the debt? I know the research notes mention Christian Schraga, a 2002 Wharton graduate, who actually crunched these exact numbers.
Yes, Schraga provides a perfect, almost ironic case study. Well, he took the very financial analysis tools he learned at Wharton and used them to ruthlessly evaluate the value of the degree he had just purchased from Wharton.
Oh, that's brilliant.
He calculated the 10-year net present value, or NPV, of a top MBA program.
Okay, let's pause and explain net present value for anyone listening who doesn't spend their days building financial models. How does that calculation actually work?
Sure. So net present value is a standard corporate metric used to determine if an investment is actually worth making. Essentially, it calculates the present-day value of all the future cash you expect to make from an investment, and then subtracts the initial cost of making that investment.
Okay, simple enough.
But here is the kicker. Because a dollar today is worth more than a dollar 10 years from now due to things like inflation and lost investing opportunities you have, to apply a discount rate to those future earnings to see what they are really worth in today's terms.
So Shraga treated his own MBA education exactly like a corporation would treat buying a new factory or upgrading their server farm.
Exactly. It was a pure, unemotional math equation. And he made incredibly generous assumptions to give the MBA every possible benefit of the doubt.
What kind of assumptions?
He assumed a pre-MBA base salary of $85,000 and a post-MBA salary of $115,000.
Okay, so that is a 35% bump in pay, which is a massive jump.
Huge jump. He also applied a standard 7% discount rate to account for the opportunity cost of his capital.
Because if you hadn't dumped 150 grand into tuition, you could have put that money into, say, an S&P 500 index fund or used it as a down payment on real estate, and it would have been growing for you over those 10 years.
Right, money has time value. So taking all of those highly optimistic factors into account, the huge salary bump, the standard market returns, the net present value of his elite Wharton MBA was negative $53,000.
Negative 53,000.
Negative. Even with a massive, immediate 35% salary bump, it is a mathematically terrible investment. Shraga calculated that it takes 12 solid years of working just to break even on the initial outlay.
12 years just to crawl out of the hole and get back to zero.
Yeah.
And during that entire decade, you are facing a non-deductible student loan repayment of roughly $1,500 every single month.
Minimum.
Minimum. That means for 12 years, you cannot save a single cent of that 35% salary bump because all of your excess income is being seized by your creditors.
And that assumes no macroeconomic disasters.
Right.
What happens if you graduate during a severe recession? What if the management consulting sector freezes hiring? The monthly loan payments do not pause for a bad economy. The financial fragility you introduce into your life by taking on that much non-dischargeable debt is just immense.
This forces us into a very, very uncomfortable corner. Well, if the mathematical return on investment is objectively negative, and the 40-year Stanford study proves that the career outcomes are totally disconnected from the actual academic training, what on earth are they teaching in those classrooms?
That is the million-dollar question.
If it isn't the mechanics of modern success, what is the curriculum actually built on?
To understand the curriculum, you really have to look at the historical origins of the business school itself. These institutions weren't designed in the modern era of agile tech startups, remote global workforces, and the internet.
They're much older than that.
Way older. They were birthed in the late 19th century, right during the peak of the Industrial Revolution. Their original stated purpose was to train a new class of professional managers in what was termed scientific management.
Scientific management, meaning what exactly?
They were trying to solve the problem of how to run massive, incredibly sluggish factory operations with maximum efficiency.
Ah, okay. So we're talking about the era of smokestacks, assembly lines, and basically treating human beings like literal cogs in a machine. Frederick Winslow Taylor is the poster child for this era, isn't he?
He is the foundational figure. Taylor famously stood on the floors of steel mills with a stopwatch, obsessively timing laborers as they hauled heavy iron ingots back and forth.
Just standing there clicking a stopwatch while guys are doing backbreaking labor.
Right. His goal was to shave mere seconds off their movements. And the underlying psychological framework of this entire era was heavily influenced by the early behaviorist philosophies of Ivan Pavlov and B.F. Skinner.
Okay, wait. We're talking about Pavlov's dogs. The experiments where you ring a bell, feed the dog, and eventually the dog salivates just at the sound of the bell. We base modern corporate management theory on conditioning dog saliva.
Stripped down to its absolute core, yes.
That is insane.
It is, but the behaviorist premise is all about stimulus and response. The belief at the time was that human workers were fundamentally unthinking, unmotivated mechanisms.
Just cogs.
Just cogs. And if you could just find the right stimulus, you could condition them to behave exactly how you wanted without ever needing them to engage in creative thought. In a corporate context, that translated into an absolute obsession with using direct financial incentives like salaries, end-of-year bonuses, stock options as the ultimate stimuli to force employees to act in ways that benefit the shareholders.
But I'm thinking about the listener right now who might be a software engineer, a graphic designer, or a marketing director. If you treat modern knowledge workers like Skinner's pigeons, pull the lever, get a pellet, it backfires horribly.
Oh, entirely.
The pressure of a dangling bonus doesn't magically make someone more creative. In fact, modern psychology tells us it often kills intrinsic motivation and lateral thinking.
You are hitting on a massive body of modern psychological research. When a task requires cognitive flexibility and creative problem solving, direct financial incentives often degrade performance. They cause tunnel vision. Yet, this incredibly flawed 19th century behaviorist mentality remains the absolute bedrock of how many MBAs are taught to view human resources.
And it couldn't be further from the reality of how the modern economy actually operates. I mean, the U.S. Small Business Administration data in the research paints a totally different picture of the landscape.
Tell me about it.
Well, small businesses represent 99.7% of all employer firms in the country. They employ half of the entire private sector workforce and generate 50% of the non-farm GDP. The vast, overwhelming majority of real commerce happening today is small, highly agile, decentralized, and completely dependent on rapid creative problem solving.
And
Yet, business schools are churning out cohorts of graduates trained as if their destiny is to manage a 1950s steel conglomerate with 20 layers of middle management.
the disconnect is profound. To survive today, businesses require speed, ingenuity, and a nuanced understanding of human psychology that extends far beyond just dangling a financial carrot. The legacy corporate giants are struggling to adapt precisely because their leadership is steeped in these outdated methods.
It's like they're speaking a dead language.
Yeah, and the business schools are paralyzed. They're unable to radically update their curricula because their entire institutional prestige is anchored to this historical model.
Okay, so to put this in perspective for you listening, these elite programs are essentially charging students $150,000, handing them a 19th century steam engine manual, and demanding they go fix a modern electric car.
That is a brilliant analogy. The mechanics of the industrial economy and the modern knowledge economy are entirely different. But the tragedy is that the curriculum didn't just stay frozen in the factory era.
It got worse.
It got worse. Because when they took this flawed, abstract worldview and applied it to modern finance, it became actively destructive.
How so?
Over the last few decades, the core focus of the MBA has violently skewed away from actual value creation toward abstract financial engineering.
Let's define what we mean by value creation, because that is really the soul of actual business. Value creation is making a product or a service that actually solves a problem and improves a customer's life. But you're saying the curriculum moved away from building things toward basically moving imaginary numbers around on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. Historically, things like marketing were just tactical ways to get physical products distributed and keep the factory lines humming. But as mass media grew, the focus shifted to capturing massive national market share. The obsession shifted to economies of scale.
Right, bigger is always better.
Right. And this birthed a corporate culture obsessed with massive mergers, leveraged buyouts, and hostile takeovers. The goal was no longer to make a better product. The goal was to find legal loopholes and accounting tricks to artificially inflate the perceived size and stock price of a company.
It's the era of, corporate synergy, where if we just smash two giant, completely unrelated companies together, we will magically generate profits, regardless of how much it destroys the culture of both companies.
Exactly. And concurrently, the discipline of finance became increasingly divorced from reality. Instead of focusing on simple, robust accounting and understanding actual cash flow, finance evolved into highly complex, opaque quantitative analysis. Corporate managers began treating statistical models like ancient priests treated the stars, using them to predict an inherently chaotic, unpredictable future with a false sense of absolute certainty.
This is where things get genuinely dangerous. The research highlights a specific Wired article detailing how deified financial formulas literally fueled the catastrophic economic crashes of the last 20 years. It mentions the Black-Scholes option pricing model, the capital asset pricing model, and the Gaussian copula function.
Yeah, those are the big ones.
Let's actually unpack one of those so the listener understands the sheer hubris involved here. How does a math formula cause a global recession? Take the Gaussian copula, for instance.
The Gaussian copula is a perfect example of this systemic delusion. Prior to the 2008 financial crisis, Wall Street banks wanted to make more money by issuing mortgages, including to people who had a high risk of defaulting.
The subprime mortgages.
Right. And to mitigate this perceived risk, They bundled thousands of these risky mortgages together into massive financial instruments called collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs.
Okay, I'm with you.
The Gaussian copula was the complex mathematical formula they used to assess the risk of these
So
bundles.
the formula was supposed to tell them how safe the investment was.
Exactly. The formula essentially told the bankers that by bundling so many different mortgages together, they had magically diversified the risk away to almost zero. It convinced them that the risk of all these different homeowners defaulting at the exact same time was statistically impossible.
Because they're all in different cities, different jobs, right?
Right. The math looked beautiful on a spreadsheet. It gave them permission to print money.
But the math didn't account for reality. It didn't account for the fact that if the broader housing market crashes or the macro economy tanks, all of those homeowners are going to default simultaneously, regardless of how they are bundled on a spreadsheet. The correlation of default wasn't zero. It was incredibly high.
Precisely. They deified the mathematical model and entirely ignored the underlying reality of the assets. They forgot about the actual human beings paying the mortgages. And when the real world crashed into the abstract math, the entire global financial system nearly collapsed.
That's terrifying.
It is. This is the danger of prioritizing financial engineering over fundamental value. Journalist Noam Scheiber pointed out a terrifying statistic regarding this shift. Since 1965, the percentage of graduates from highly ranked business schools choosing to go into finance and consulting has doubled.
So they completely stopped wanting to build things. They moved from the factory floor to the trading floor, where they could extract wealth without actually creating it.
And Scheiber uses General Motors as a prime catastrophic example of this exact trend.
GM, what happened there?
In the years leading up to GM's massive struggles and eventual bankruptcy, look at who was running the company. Top executives, including CEOs like Fritz Henderson and Rick Wagoner, did not come up through the engineering ranks. They didn't come from design, and they didn't come from the manufacturing floor.
Where'd they come from?
They came straight from the company's treasurer's office. They were finance guys.
Wow. So the people running the largest car company in the world had no idea how to actually build a great car.
Because they spent their careers analyzing spreadsheets, they were completely numb to the on-the-ground operational innovations required to build high-quality vehicles at a competitive cost. They were attempting to manage the balance sheet while ignoring the product.
And the iron law of business is that if you manage the balance sheet instead of the product inevitably suffers, the customer abandons you for a competitor, and eventually your precious balance sheet collapses anyway. It is literally playing with fire.
It really is.
This is such a critical takeaway for the listener. True business is not about orchestrating legal accounting fraud, and is not about maximizing short-term quarterly earnings by piling debt onto a company. True business is exceptionally simple. It is about profitably creating and delivering real value to a paying customer. The financialization of the MBA curriculum obscures that fundamental truth behind a wall of jargon.
It fosters a toxic corporate environment where the highest reward goes to those who extract value through transaction fees and short-term stock manipulation, rather than to those who build sustainable organizations that actually contribute to society. When short-term financial engineering trumps long-term operational prudence, the people who suffer the consequences are the employees who lose their jobs and the customers who get a terrible product.
So let's take a breath and look at the landscape we've uncovered. The financial math of acquiring an MBA is terrible, resulting in a negative net present value and a decade of debt. The psychological underpinnings of the curriculum are based on 19th century factory management that actively demotivates modern workers. And the modern curriculum's obsession with abstract financial engineering is actively dangerous to companies and the broader economy.
That sums it up.
So if we are being completely objective, is there any legitimate reason left to get an MBA today?
If we look at the reality of the corporate landscape, there is one, and really only one, significant tangible benefit to attending an elite top-tier MBA program.
I'm all ears.
It functions as a highly efficient filter for recruiters at Fortune 50 mega corporations, major management consulting firms like McKinsey, and elite investment banks on Wall Street.
So it's a golden ticket past the gatekeepers. You are paying for access.
Yes. Because these programs are extraordinarily difficult to get into, massive corporate HR departments use them as an outsourced screening mechanism. They know that if you survived the admissions process, you have already been pre-screened for high intelligence, intense ambition, and a proven willingness to endure immense workloads.
Right. They don't have to do the vetting because Harvard already did it.
Exactly. So If your singular overriding goal in life is to become a fast-tracked executive at a legacy corporation or a high-level investment banker, you might realistically have to purchase that $150,000 interview.
You are literally buying an exorbitant interview. But I imagine even that specific benefit comes with massive caveats. It can't be a lifelong free pass.
Oh, the caveats are enormous. First, that golden ticket aura wears off incredibly quickly, typically within 3 to 5 years after graduation.
Yeah.
Yeah. After your initial placement in the firm, the prestige of your degree fades into the background noise. From that point on, you are judged entirely on your actual performance, your ability to execute, and your tangible accomplishments. The degree cannot save you if you cannot do the work.
And we had to talk about the reality of the reward for landing that prestigious job. You endure the grueling admissions process. You take on a mortgage worth of debt. You win the interview. You get the coveted job. And your prize is working 80 to 100 hours a week in an incredibly high-stress, cutthroat environment.
It's a meat grinder.
It is. If we look at the physiological and psychological toll of it, the sleep deprivation,
Yeah.
the constant anxiety, it's brutal. Which leads to a terrifying question. What happens if you take this path? You land the job at the investment bank, and after 12 months you realize it is destroying your soul. What if you hate it?
This is where the trap snaps shut on people, and it is a grim reality. Remember the negative net present value and the $150,000 in debt. In the United States, student loan debt is notoriously difficult, almost impossible to discharge in bankruptcy.
You can't just wipe it away.
You are permanently locked in. You cannot simply walk into your boss's office, quit, and decide to start a low-stress bakery or take a lower-paying job at a nonprofit that you actually care about. You have creditors breathing down your neck demanding $1,500 every single month, regardless of your mental health.
So you are forced to endure it. You stay in a toxic environment that you despise simply because you literally cannot afford to leave.
You endure chronic stress. It is well documented that these high-pressure executive roles carry notoriously high rates of divorce, substance abuse, and severe debilitating burnout. You end up trading your autonomy, your physical health, and your closest relationships just to service a debt for a degree that you only needed to get the job you now want to escape.
It is the modern definition of indentured servitude.
That's exactly what it is.
I really want you listening to absorb this, because it is the most practical, life-saving takeaway we've discussed. The primary reason people spend decades trapped in jobs they utterly despise is to pay off debt. If you want to protect your freedom, your creativity, and your autonomy, you must fiercely protect your finances. Do not mortgage your future for a credential that turns into a cage.
It is a bleak scenario for those who enter the system blindly. However, understanding this bleak reality is what forces us to seek out a vastly superior alternative.
Yes, let's talk about the alternative.
Because if the knowledge of how to operate a business is genuinely valuable, but the traditional institutional delivery system is broken and financially ruinous, how do we acquire the knowledge without inheriting the chains?
And that pivot changes everything. It brings us to the alternative, the self-directed crash course. The fundamental truth here is incredibly empowering. If you are smart enough, driven enough, and capable enough to score well on the GMAT and get accepted into a top-tier MBA program, you are absolutely capable of learning the core fundamentals of business entirely on your own.
100%. Education is non-negotiable. You must learn how commerce works. But self-education is the only pathway that allows you to absorb the critical concepts without the institutional baggage and the crippling debt.
You don't need the ivory tower.
You don't need a tenured professor to read a textbook to you at a glacial pace. You can seek out the foundational texts of business, psychology, and systems theory yourself, absorb them at your own speed, and immediately apply those concepts to your own projects in the real world.
So if a listener wants to bypass the MBA entirely and construct their own self-directed curriculum, what should they actually be studying? If we strip away the fluff, what are the core architectural pillars of a real-world business education?
The foundational architecture of any real-world business education rests on 3 core pillars. The first is understanding how businesses work.
Okay, what does that encompass?
This means stripping a business down to its 5 fundamental universal components: value creation, marketing, sales, value delivery, and finance. You must understand how to discover what people actually want and create it, how to capture their attention in a noisy world, how to build trust and close a transaction, how to reliably deliver on the promise you made, and how to manage the cash flow so the entire operation doesn't collapse.
The absolute unglamorous mechanics of commerce. No buzzwords, just the biological functions of a transaction.
Right.
But mastering the mechanics is only half the battle because you still have to deal with the messy reality of the people operating those mechanics. Right?
Exactly, which is the second pillar, how people work. Every business on Earth is created by human beings and survives only by providing a benefit to other human beings. Yeah, if you do not possess a deep understanding of fundamental human psychology, how people make decisions, what truly motivates them beyond those financial parrots we talked about, how they communicate, and how they perceive value, you will fail regardless of how technologically brilliant your product is. You have to understand the human operating system.
And the final piece of the puzzle.
The third pillar is how systems work. Businesses do not exist in a vacuum. They are complex systems operating within even larger, more chaotic systems like global markets and macroeconomies. You need to develop the ability to analyze a complex system, identify the bottlenecks and constraints that are holding it back, understand feedback loops, and implement improvements without triggering catastrophic, unintended second-order consequences.
What I find fascinating is what is actively omitted from that list. A self-directed education allows you to completely bypass the academic bloat.
Oh, the fluff.
Yeah, you don't waste precious months debating abstract leadership theories that only function in a sterile classroom environment. You don't need to suffer through advanced managerial accounting or high-level quantitative analysis unless your specific goal is to become a CPA or a Wall Street quant. You focus purely and relentlessly on the mental models that are economically valuable and practically applicable to building things.
You are filtering out the noise to focus on the signal. Consider Charlie Munger, the legendary investor and Warren Buffett's longtime business partner. He is the ultimate shining example of this self-directed approach.
Oh, Munger is a great example.
Munger never formally studied business. He started as a meteorologist and later became a lawyer, but he possessed an insatiable curiosity and relentlessly educated himself across a wide variety of disciplines, history, psychology, biology, physics, to construct what he famously called a latticework of mental models.
He didn't stay in one lane.
Never. He utilized fundamental principles of human behavior and systems theory to evaluate the viability of businesses better than almost anyone holding a formal financial degree.
He succeeded precisely because he understood the messy underlying reality of the business and the unpredictable humans running it, rather than just staring at a sanitized, idealized spreadsheet.
Right, and that approach is available to anyone.
Yeah.
By focusing your energy on acquiring these core mental models, you gain a massive, tangible advantage over someone who spent 2 years memorizing outdated factory management theories just to pass a standardized multiple-choice test.
For you listening right now, I want this reality to deeply sink in. You do not need a piece of paper with a fancy seal to prove you understand how the world works. You do not need permission from a university admissions committee to call yourself a business person or an entrepreneur. You simply need to grasp these core mental models, these fundamental truths about creating value, understanding people, and navigating systems, and then relentlessly apply them in the real world.
Knowledge is only powerful when it is deeply understood and actively applied, not when it is passively framed and hung on a wall. And the barrier to entry for acquiring this knowledge has never been lower in the history of human civilization. The books, the research papers, the case studies, the podcasts, the insights, they are all readily available to you for the cost of a library card or a basic internet connection. The only thing standing between you and a world-class business education is your own curiosity and dedication.
As we synthesize everything we've uncovered today, the soul of this entire discussion is a radical redefinition of what business actually is. Business is not some mystical, esoteric science reserved for an elite class of intellectuals in ivory towers. It is a profoundly straightforward, practical discipline of creating value for other human beings and being compensated for it.
And true, resilient business competence does not come from purchasing an expensive, increasingly outdated credential that saddles you with paralyzing debt and artificially limits your life choices. True competence is forged by deeply understanding the fundamental principles of human nature and systemic mechanics, and then having the courage to actually step into the arena and apply those principles.
Education remains the absolute ultimate tool for success. But self-education is the only kind that guarantees you retain ownership of both your money and your life. You remain financially agile, you stay debt-free, and you keep your focus locked on what actually matters, creating real, tangible value in the real world.
It ultimately comes down to preserving your autonomy. When you bypass the debt trap of the traditional MBA, you maintain the freedom to take calculated risks, to innovate, to fail and try again, and perhaps most importantly, the freedom to walk away from toxic situations that do not serve you. In a rapidly evolving, unpredictable global economy, that financial and intellectual autonomy is the most powerful asset an entrepreneur or a professional can possess.
Now that we've thrown out the wildly expensive textbooks and ripped up the business school application, it's time to look at what a business actually is. Next time, we're going to dive right into that first pillar and break down the 5 simple, universal parts that make up every successful company on Earth.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final provocative question to mull over. If the smartest, most adaptable, and most innovative business minds of our current generation are increasingly bypassing the traditional MBA entirely, what does that signify for the future of higher education as a whole? Are we witnessing the beginning of the end for the traditional university degree?
Keep asking the hard questions, keep relentlessly educating yourself, and we'll see you on the next deep dive. Imagine walking into, like a sleek, glass-walled boardroom. Sitting at the head of the table is a newly minted executive with his pristine MBA from a top-tier Ivy League university.
Right.
And it's a pedigree that costs roughly, a $250,000 to acquire.
Oh, yeah, easily.
But then beside them is a community college dropout who started a commercial landscaping business out of a rusty pickup truck.
Okay.
Fast forward 5 years. The executive's company has just been driven into bankruptcy following some complex corporate restructuring.
Mm-hmm.
While the dropout has seamlessly scaled their regional operation, they dominate the market, and they just sold it for $50 million in cash.
Wow.
So the provocative question we have to ask you today in this deep dive is this: what if that prestigious, wildly expensive traditional business degree is actually a trap?
Right.
Like, what if instead of teaching you how to build a robust, thriving enterprise from scratch, it primarily trains you in the esoteric art of bankrupting them?
I mean, it is a phenomenal question, and it really strikes right at the heart of a narrative that, our culture has treated as absolute gospel for the better part of a century.
Yeah, we just accept it as fact.
Exactly. So what we are fundamentally unpacking today are the 3 massive structural problems with traditional business education that our source material highlights.
Okay.
But we aren't just stopping at a critique. Once we deconstruct that historically broken model, we are going to replace it with the true raw machinery of commerce.
Love that.
Yeah, we are looking at the foundational architecture of every successful venture on the planet. We're stripping away the academic jargon to examine the primal psychology of value creation and what actually compels human beings to part with their resources.
And this is exactly why this deep dive matters to you, whether you are listening to this on your commute to a corporate job you want to absolutely dominate, or, conceptualizing a side hustle from your kitchen table.
Right, or even trying to scale a tech startup.
Exactly. We are conditioned to believe that business is this hyper-academic, wildly complex science reserved for people who can, do calculus in their sleep while predicting global macroeconomic trends.
Which is just not true.
Right. The reality is far more grounded. It is accessible. And by understanding the bare essentials of how a business actually operates the physics of the market, you gain an unparalleled advantage over those who are trapped relying on theoretical classroom models.
You really do.
So let's jump straight into the deep end. The critique leveled against the traditional MBA in our sources is absolutely blistering.
Oh, it is.
And it starts with the reality that fundamentally alters the trajectory of a person's life, which is crippling financial debt.
Yeah, it truly is the structural foundation of the whole problem. I mean, when we analyze a traditional top-tier MBA program, we are not talking about a modest investment in self-improvement.
No, not at all.
The tuition, the mandatory fees, the cost of living in these expensive academic hubs for 2 years. I mean, this easily ranges between $125,000 to $200,000, if not more.
Which is just a staggering amount of money.
It is. And remember, the vast majority of these candidates are already carrying substantial debt loads from their undergraduate degrees.
Right.
But the financial figure itself isn't even the most insidious part. It's the psychological and behavioral consequence of that debt. You are not buying freedom or entrepreneurial leverage. You are effectively purchasing a highly prestigious form of indentured servitude.
That is the exact paradox, isn't it? Like, people go to business school because they want to be their own boss, or they want the freedom to shape industries.
Exactly.
But then they graduate with a loan payment that rivals a luxury mortgage, Except they don't actually have a house to live in.
Right, you can't live in your diploma.
Yeah, so if you have a $2,000 or $3,000 monthly nut hanging over your head the exact moment you walk off the graduation stage, your options completely collapse.
They vanish.
You absolutely cannot afford to take risks. You can't start that scrappy, innovative new venture in your garage because, well, your garage doesn't pay you a salary on day one.
Exactly. You are systematically forced to take a high-stress 80 to 100-hour-a-week corporate consulting or investment banking job just to keep your creditors at bay.
You end up working for the bank, not for yourself.
Precisely. The debt mandates a specific career path. It forces risk aversion. And this naturally transitions into the second massive problem identified in our sources, which is the actual curriculum you are mortgaging your future to learn.
Right. What are they actually teaching you for 200 grand?
Exactly. To understand why modern business schools teach what they do, you have to trace their DNA back to their origins. They did not originate to teach people how to start a bakery or a software company.
No.
They popped up during the height of the Industrial Revolution with a very specific utilitarian mandate.
Right. They were essentially managerial factories designed to create supervisors for actual factories. It wasn't about innovation at all.
No, it was about optimization and control.
Yeah.
The foundational philosophy of early business management programs was heavily rooted in Taylorism, named after Frederick Winslow Taylor. He pioneered what he called scientific management in the late 19th and early 20th century.
Nice guy with the stopwatch.
Yes. Taylor was the man who would literally stand in steel mills with a stopwatch, timing the exact seconds it took laborers to load heavy iron ingots onto train cars.
Which just sounds so degrading.
Oh, it was. His entire objective was to strip away all autonomy and humanity from the worker. He viewed the human being as a flawed, inefficient cog in a vast industrial machine.
Wow.
The goal was to find the one optimal physical movement, enforce it rigidly, and treat workers much like you would treat a machine part field. Apply the right stimulus, maximize the output, and minimize the cost.
So the DNA of business school is rooted in treating human beings as programmable assets.
Basically, yeah.
But clearly we aren't all managing steel mills anymore. So how did that stopwatch-obsessed industrial mindset evolve into what is being taught today?
Well, it had to pivot.
Because my understanding is that the critique shifts from this rigid operational focus to a dangerous obsession with high-level financial abstraction.
That is exactly the pivot. As manufacturing shifted globally and the nature of corporate America changed, the business school curriculum had to adapt to maintain its prestige.
Makes sense.
So instead of focusing on the messy, tangible reality of creating a fantastic product that genuinely improves a customer's life, the focus shifted radically toward finance, quantitative analysis, and what we might call financial engineering.
Financial engineering, right.
The overriding philosophy became maximizing shareholder value above all else, primarily through abstract market mechanics.
Let's dig into that abstraction, because the source material explicitly calls out some highly technical mechanisms that I think we really need to demystify.
Sure.
It mentions that business schools began churning out executives who were obsessed with leverage buyouts and complex financial formulas, specifically pointing a finger at things like the Black-Scholes option pricing model as direct contributors to catastrophes like the 2008 financial crash.
Absolutely.
Let's start with the leveraged buyout, or LBO. We hear this term constantly in the news when a beloved retail chain suddenly goes bankrupt. How does an LBO actually work, and why is the MBA mindset so drawn to it?
It is a critical concept to understand because it perfectly illustrates the difference between creating value and merely extracting it.
Okay, lay it out for me.
Imagine you want to buy a house that costs $1 million, but you only have $10,000 of your own money.
Right. Normally you're out of luck.
In a normal world, yeah, you can't buy that house. But in the world of a leveraged buyout, you convince a bank to lend you the remaining $990,000.
Okay, but how?
Well, you don't use your own income to guarantee the loan. You legally use the house itself and the future rent you plan to charge the tenants as the collateral to pay off the massive debt you just took out to buy it.
So you are basically forcing the asset you are buying to pay for its own acquisition.
Exactly. Now, applied to a massive corporation, a private equity firm, often staffed entirely by elite MBAs, will target a healthy, profitable company.
Right.
They buy the company using a staggering amount of borrowed money, and they saddle the newly acquired company with that debt.
Wow.
Now, this company, which used to have plenty of cash flow to invest in research development and employee welfare, is suddenly drowning in interest payments.
Because it has to pay off the loan the private equity firm used to buy it.
Precisely. To survive and pay down the debt, the MBA executives have to ruthlessly cut costs.
Right.
They fire staff, they halt product innovation, they sell off the real estate the company owns and rent it back. On a spreadsheet, for a few brief quarters, the company looks highly profitable because expenses have plummeted.
But it's an illusion.
It's completely hollow. The executives pay themselves massive dividends, and then a few years later, the hollowed-out company collapses under the weight of the debt and files for bankruptcy.
That is deeply unsettling. I mean, they haven't created a single new customer, they haven't improved the product by one iota, yet they have extracted millions in personal wealth while destroying the underlying entity.
Exactly.
They treated a living, breathing company with thousands of employees the exact same way Frederick Winslow Taylor treated a piece of pig iron. It's an extraction mindset, completely devoid of creation.
And that mindset is heavily reinforced by the mathematical models they are taught, which brings us to the Black Scholes model you mentioned earlier.
Right, the Nobel Prize-winning formula.
Yeah, this was a revolutionary mathematical formula developed in the 1970s used to determine the fair price or theoretical value for a call or a put option, essentially, derivatives in the financial markets. It is incredibly elegant mathematics.
But elegance doesn't necessarily mean it reflects reality. Where is the danger?
The danger lies in its underlying assumptions. Black Scholes assumes that financial markets act rationally.
Which they don't.
Not at all. It assumes that stock prices move in a predictable, log-normal distribution, a bell curve. It assumes you can hedge your bets perfectly and continuously without transaction costs.
Right.
And most dangerously, it assumes that extreme, catastrophic market events are statistically so rare that you can basically ignore them.
But anyone who has lived through the last 20 years knows that catastrophic, unprecedented events, what Nassim Taleb would call black swans, happen with terrifying regularity.
Exactly. But when you have a generation of financial executives who are taught to trust the mathematics of the formula over the messy reality of human panic and structural fragility, they take on massive systemic risks.
Wow.
They build houses of cards based on the assumption that a storm will never come because the equation says storms are a statistical anomaly.
And then 2008 happens.
Right. When the housing market began to crack in 2007 and 2008, the real-world variables broke the mathematical models. The executives were flying blind because they were trained to trust the map rather than look out the window at the actual terrain.
This just paints a damning picture. You have a curriculum that produces executives skilled at value extraction, reliant on abstract, fundamentally flawed mathematical assumptions, rather than the core operations of delivering a high-quality product.
It really does.
But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Even if the curriculum is flawed, and even if the debt is high, isn't there an undeniable pragmatic reality we are ignoring?
What's that?
What about the network? Doesn't an Ivy League MBA basically act as a golden ticket, a VIP pass that guarantees you an interview at Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, or Google? Isn't the Rolodex alone worth the price of admission?
That is the one piece of nuance we absolutely have to acknowledge, and the source material doesn't shy away from it. Yes, the single most tangible, undeniable benefit of a top-tier MBA program is the access to elite corporate recruiters.
Right, the pipelines are real.
The Fortune 500 companies have institutional pipelines built directly into those campuses. If your sole ambition in life is to enter a prestigious management consulting firm at a senior associate level right out of school, an MBA is the most efficient, albeit expensive, gate key.
But I'm hearing a but.
There is a critical caveat. That halo effect, the prestige of the diploma, has an incredibly short half-life. It only lasts for about 3 to 5 years post-graduation.
Oh, really? So if you are 10 years into your career and you are sitting across from a hiring manager or a venture capitalist, they couldn't care less that you went to Wharton or Stanford.
They absolutely do not care. By year 5, the only metric that matters is what you have tangibly accomplished in the real world.
Right.
Have you grown revenue? Have you successfully led a team? Have you launched a product? The credential fades completely into the background, and the data backs this up dramatically.
I think the source mentioned a specific study on this.
Yes, the source highlights a massive, highly scrutinized study conducted by Stanford researchers Jeffrey Pfeffer and Christina Fong. They analyzed 40 years of comprehensive data tracking business school graduates.
40 years, wow.
And their findings were devastating to the traditional MBA narrative. They found zero correlation between possessing an MBA degree or the grades earned in those incredibly difficult MBA courses and long-term career success.
Zero correlation. We really need to let that sink in for a moment. Whether you graduate at the absolute top of your class, acing every complex financial modeling exam, or you scraped by at the bottom, or you never went at all, it does not accurately predict your eventual salary, your rise to the executive suite, or your competence as a leader.
It doesn't.
It is a highly expensive sorting mechanism, not a guarantee of capability.
Which leads us to the ultimate conclusion of this first section. If you're listening to this, you have to ruthlessly protect your financial future. Do not take on massive, life-altering debt for a credential that fundamentally does not guarantee competence and primarily teaches you how to manage the status quo rather than innovate.
So what's the alternative?
The alternative is investing your time and your resources in self-directed education. You must read voraciously, study mental models, run small, low-risk experiments, and apply knowledge directly in the real world.
Because if the traditional hyper-academic MBA is an illusion, you need a completely different, infinitely more practical framework.
Exactly.
If we throw out the stopwatches, the leveraged buyouts, and the Black-Scholes equations, what is actually left? What is the irreducible minimum of commerce?
It's surprisingly simple.
According to our sources, if you strip away all the jargon, there are exactly 5 interdependent parts to every single business on Earth. This is the universal definition, the absolute bedrock.
It is brilliantly elegant in its simplicity. A business is not a legal entity, a logo, or a stock ticker. A business is a repeatable process that reliably does 5 specific things.
Let's hear them.
First, it creates and delivers something of value. Second, that value is something that other people genuinely want or need. Third, it is offered at a price people are willing to pay.
Okay.
Fourth, it is delivered in a way that actually satisfies the customer's expectations. And fifth, the business brings in enough profit to make it worthwhile for the owners to continue the operation.
Value creation, marketing, sales, value delivery, and finance. That is it. That is the entire DNA of commerce.
That's the whole thing.
And what is so powerful about this framework is its universality. It scales perfectly. It applies whether you are an 8-year-old running a solo lemonade stand on a hot July afternoon, or you are a trillion-dollar multinational behemoth like Apple or Amazon.
Exactly.
If you remove any one of those 5 pillars, the structure instantly collapses. You no longer have a business, you have something else entirely.
Let's actually break down what happens when those pillars are missing, because it's fascinating. If you have no value creation, meaning you aren't making anything useful or desirable, you don't have a business, you just have a hobby. If you create tremendous value, but you have no marketing, meaning you fail to attract attention and no one knows you exist, you have a flop.
Oh.
If you successfully market and attract attention, but you have no money, sales, meaning you can't convince people to actually part with their money and complete a transaction, you have a nonprofit organization.
And even nonprofits have to utilize sales psychology to convince donors to part with their capital to fund the mission.
Precisely. They are still selling the feeling of contribution. Now, if you have value marketing and sales, but you fail completely at value delivery, meaning you take people's money but do not provide what you promised, or the product is fundamentally defective, you don't have a business, you have a scam. You are committing fraud.
Yikes.
And finally, if you execute the first 4 perfectly, but your finance is broken, meaning it costs you more to create and deliver the value than you are charging, you simply have a closure. The business bleeds out and dies.
The analogy that always comes to mind here is viewing a business not as a machine, but as a living biological organism. They are incredibly complex systems where every organ must communicate with the others.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, like value creation is the heart.
Yeah.
Pumping the lifeblood of utility into the whole system. Marketing is the nervous system, constantly reaching out, sensing the environment, and pulling in signals.
Right.
Sales is the digestive system, consuming resources and converting them into energy. Value delivery is the muscular system, doing the actual heavy lifting and movement. And finance is the brain and the bloodstream, keeping track of the resources, measuring the health, and ensuring oxygen gets where it needs to go.
That is a phenomenal way to conceptualize it because it highlights the systemic nature of the 5 parts. They do not operate in silos.
Yeah.
The nervous system of marketing has to feed accurate sensory data back to the heart of value creation. If marketing realizes the environment has shifted, value creation has to have mapped the product.
And just like a biological organism, if a single major organ fails, the entire organism dies, regardless of how incredibly healthy the other organs are.
Right.
You can have the most breathtaking, world-changing product ever designed. You can have brilliant marketing and massive sales. But if your value delivery fails, if you can't actually manufacture and ship the product, the business dies.
It's over.
Think about the catastrophic failure of the Fire Festival.
Oh, perfect example.
They had world-class, unprecedented marketing. They had incredible sales. People paid tens of thousands of dollars for tickets. But their value delivery was non-existent. They had FEMA tents and cheese sandwiches instead of luxury villas. They organized night in spectacular public fashion.
Or look at Theranos.
Yes.
Incredible marketing, massive financing, aggressive sales to investors, but the core value creation, the blood testing machine, simply did not work.
Which is why this 5-part framework is not just descriptive. It is the ultimate diagnostic tool for any entrepreneur or professional.
It really is.
If you are listening right now and you have an idea for a business, you must rigorously map it against these 5 components. How specifically will you create value? How will you attract the attention of a distracted world?
Right.
How will you build enough trust to convince them to hand you their hard-earned money? How will you fulfill your promise efficiently? And how will you ensure the map actually leaves a margin of profit?
Exactly.
If you cannot clearly and definitively answer how your idea satisfies all 5 of those requirements, you do not understand your own idea well enough to launch it yet.
It is the ultimate reality check. It forces you out of the cloud and grounds you in operational reality.
So if we look at the life cycle of this organism, everything obviously kicks off with the very first part, which is value creation. You have to build something.
Yes.
But this is the crucial pivot. Creating value in a vacuum is completely useless if you spend years building something that absolutely nobody in the world actually wants.
Which introduces us to what the source material ominously calls the iron law of the market.
The iron law. Sounds intimidating.
It is. The iron law is cold, it is objective, and it is entirely unforgiving. It simply states that if you do not have a large group of people who desperately want what you have to offer, your chances of success are virtually zero.
The market does not care how smart you are, how hard you worked, or how elegant your code is. Markets that do not exist cannot pay you.
Exactly. You can have the most brilliant founding team in the world, backed by infinite venture capital, building a flawless product, but if the market doesn't exist, none of it will redeem the venture. The iron law dictates everything.
And when incredibly smart, accomplished people ignore this law, the results are catastrophic.
Oh, absolutely.
This leads us directly to one of the most fascinating cautionary tales in modern business history, which our source highlights perfectly. We have to talk about Dean Kamen in the segue.
Yes, the segue.
If anyone should have succeeded based purely on intellect and resources, it was this team.
It is the perfect illustration of engineering arrogance blinding someone to market realities. For context, Dean Kamen is not just a smart guy. He is an absolute genius, a prolific and celebrated inventor.
Right.
Long before the Segway, he invented the first wearable infusion pump, revolutionized dialysis machines, and created incredible water purification systems. He fundamentally understands how to build things that change lives.
Right. He isn't some amateur tinkering in a garage.
And when rumors started circulating in the late 90s about his new top-secret project codenamed Ginger, or IT, the hype was unprecedented.
Unbelievable hype.
I remember this vividly. You had massive tech titans, people like Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos, being brought in under strict non-disclosure agreements to view the prototypes.
Yep.
Steve Jobs allegedly said this invention would be as big a deal as the creation of the personal computer. Legendary venture capitalist John Doerr said it would reach $1 billion in sales faster than any company in history, and that cities would literally redesign their infrastructure to accommodate it. The expectations were atmospheric, and Kamen poured over $100 million into research and development. And from a purely technical standpoint, the resulting product was a marvel. The Segway was a two-wheeled, self-balancing personal transporter. It used aerospace-grade solid-state gyroscopes and tilt sensors to monitor the user's center of gravity 100 times a second.
Which was basically sci-fi at the time.
It was. You leaned forward, it moved forward. You leaned back, it stopped. It felt like magic. The engineering was, by all accounts, practically flawless.
Flawless engineering.
Oh.
$100 million in R&D, backing from the biggest names in Silicon Valley. So they launched the Segway in 2002. The company boldly announces to the press that they expect to sell 50,000 units a week by the end of their first year.
50,000 a week.
Do you know how many they actually sold? They sold about 23,000 units total in their first 5 years.
Wow.
They hit less than 1% of their projections. It was an unmitigated commercial disaster. So what happened? Why did the Iron Law crush them?
They failed because they completely ignored the fundamental reality of the market. They were so enamored with the brilliance of their own technology that they never stopped to ask if anyone actually had a burning desire to use it.
Right.
First, look at the price point. They launched it at roughly $5,000. So, the Iron Law asks, is there a massive group of people desperate to spend $5,000 on a motorized scooter just so they don't have to walk?
And the answer was a resounding no.
Exactly. Walking is free, it's healthy, and it works perfectly well for short distances. If you need to go a little further, a bicycle is a fraction of the cost. If you need to go a long way, you use a car.
Makes total sense.
The Segway didn't solve a burning problem. It was a phenomenally expensive solution in search of a problem.
And it actually created new problems. Because it was motorized but slow, it lived in this weird regulatory purgatory. You couldn't ride it on the street because cars would run you over, but pedestrians hated you if you rode it on the sidewalk. You couldn't easily carry it up a flight of stairs because it weighed 100 pounds. They assumed that because the technology was cool, the market would organically manifest out of thin air. They built the product in absolute secrecy, completely isolated from user feedback, and assumed demand would follow.
This is the crux of the lesson. The Segway team validated the technology, but they failed to validate the market. They ultimately found a tiny niche mall security guards and tourist excursion groups, but that is not a market that justifies a $100 million investment.
Definitely not.
This directly connects to a concept the source material calls economically valuable skills.
Right, which are defined as skills that directly relate to one of those 5 parts of a business we just discussed. If a skill doesn't help create value, market, sell, deliver, or manage finances, it is not economically valuable to the broader market.
Right.
But I have to push back on this framework a bit because it feels a little cold. For generations, we have been told by graduation speakers and self-help books to follow your passion.
Oh, yeah.
The narrative is that if you do what you love, the money will naturally follow. Is that advice just fundamentally flawed? What if my deepest passion is, say, whitewater rafting or restoring antique clocks? I love doing it. Isn't there inherent value in following that passion?
It is a vital question because that specific piece of advice, follow your passion, has probably led more well-intentioned entrepreneurs into bankruptcy than almost anything else.
Really?
Yeah. The source material provides a crucial, sobering nuance here. Passion is fantastic. It is necessary for a fulfilling life, but passion by itself is a hobby. The harsh reality of the Iron Law is that the market fundamentally does not care what you are passionate about.
Wow.
The market is entirely selfish. It only cares about its own unmet needs, its own pain points, and its own desires.
So if I just love whitewater rafting and I want someone to pay me to do it, the market's response is basically, good for you, but how does that help me?
Exactly. However, you do not have to abandon your passion. You have to translate it. You have to find the intersection between what you deeply love doing and what the market desperately needs. You must convert your personal passion into an economically valuable skill for someone else.
Let's play that out. How do I translate the whitewater rafting passion?
Well, if you just want to raft, nobody pays you. But if you take that passion and your deep knowledge of the rivers and you build a business guiding safe, thrilling tours for wealthy tourists who want an adventure but don't have the skills now, you are providing value.
Oh,
If you leverage your experience to write the definitive, highly technical manual on rapid navigation that other guides buy to stay safe, now you have an economically valuable product.
right.
If you use your intimate knowledge of where gear fails to design and manufacture a stronger, lighter, better life vest, you are solving a market problem. You have taken the raw energy of your passion and channeled it through the 5 parts of a business to satisfy the Iron Law.
The insight there is profound. You shouldn't blindly follow your passion. You should bring your passion with you as you solve the market's problems.
Exactly.
So the ultimate practical application for anyone listening is this: never, under any circumstances, spend months or years building a product in secret before you have validated that people actually want to buy it. Look before you leap to ensure you are standing on the right side of the Iron Law.
Could not agree more.
But this naturally begs a deeper, almost psychological question. If the market is entirely driven by its own needs, how do you figure out what those needs actually are? How do you decode what people genuinely want before you build the solution?
To answer that, you have to leave the realm of finance and engineering entirely. You have to dig deeply into evolutionary biology and primal human psychology.
Biology.
Yes. You have to understand the fundamental mechanics of what actually drives human behavior at a subconscious level.
And this is where the source material introduces the framework of the 5 core human drives. These are the underlying, hardwired biological imperatives that dictate essentially all human action and, by extension, every consumer choice ever made.
Right.
We aren't as rational as we think we are. We are mammals driven by deep evolutionary programming.
Exactly. This framework relies heavily on the research of Harvard Business School professors Paul Lawrence and Nitin Nonoria. They identified that across all cultures and all demographics, there are fundamental drives that influence our choices.
Okay,
If a business does not tap into at least one of these drives, it will fail because it will not trigger the motivation required for a person to take action. Let's walk through them.
let's do it.
The first is the drive to acquire. From an evolutionary standpoint, early humans who gathered and hoarded resources, food, tools, shelter, were more likely to survive winters and famines.
Makes sense.
Today, this manifests as the desire to obtain physical objects and wealth. But it also extends to immaterial things, the drive to acquire status, power, influence, and prestige within a social hierarchy.
So when you look at the economy, retail stores, investment brokerages, real estate agencies, and even high-end political consulting firms, they are all fundamentally tapping into this drive to acquire. They're helping you gather resources or gather power.
Correct. The second imperative is the drive to bond. Humans are apex predators, not because we have sharp claws, but because we collaborate. We are deeply social creatures.
Right, lone wolves die out.
Exactly. Being ostracized from the tribe historically meant death. Therefore, we have an intense desire to feel valued, to form deep relationships, both romantic and platonic, and to feel a sense of belonging to a larger group.
This maps perfectly to massive industries. Dating apps, local community restaurants, massive conventions like Comic-Con, social media platforms, even country clubs. They aren't selling food or software, they are selling connection and belonging.
The third is the drive to learn. Humans have an innate need to satisfy our curiosity, to make sense of our environment, and to recognize patterns. Understanding the world around us reduces uncertainty and danger.
Which is exactly what academia, nonfiction book publishers, massive online course platforms, and training workshops are built upon.
Yes.
In fact, if you are listening to this deep dive right now, we are directly satisfying your drive to learn.
We certainly hope so. The fourth drive is the drive to defend. We are hardwired to protect ourselves, our loved ones, our property, and our deeply held beliefs from external threats.
Loss aversion, right?
Yes, loss aversion is a powerful psychological trigger. We fight harder to keep what we have than to gain something new.
So this is the foundation for home alarm systems, cybersecurity firms, the entire insurance industry, martial arts studios, and legal defense services. They're all selling peace of mind and protection.
Exactly. And the author of our source material adds a crucial fifth drive to Lawrence and Noria's original 4, which is the drive to feel. We seek out sensory stimulus, intense emotional experiences, pleasure, excitement, anticipation, and entertainment. A life devoid of feeling is practically unbearable.
This explains the massive economics behind the entertainment industry. Movies, live concerts, professional sporting events, video games, fine dining, theme parks. You aren't paying for calories at a Michelin-star restaurant. You are paying for the sensory and emotional experience.
Precisely.
Now, if we look at the mechanics of these drives, we can understand why certain brands achieve almost mythical status while others struggle. Let's analyze a luxury brand like Rolex through this lens.
Good example.
If you want a tool that accurately tells time, a $10 digital watch you buy at a pharmacy is demonstrably superior to a mechanical Rolex. It is more accurate, more durable, and requires less maintenance. So why do people happily wait on lists for years to spend $15,000 on a Rolex?
Because a Rolex is not a timekeeping device. It is a psychological tool engineered to hit multiple core human drives simultaneously.
Break it down.
First, it hits the drive to acquire. It is a highly visible, instantly recognizable symbol of wealth and status. It signals to the world that you have conquered your domain.
And second, it brilliantly hits the drive to bond. Rolex owners are a subtle, exclusive tribe. When you wear one, you are signaling to a specific elite group that you belong among them. You are bonding over shared appreciation for horology and success.
Exactly.
Just look at the famous Patek Philippe marketing campaign. You never actually own a Patek Philippe. You merely look after it for the next generation. They're tying the acquisition of a watch directly to the deep biological drive to bond with your offspring and secure your legacy.
It's genius marketing. And third, they hit the drive to feel. There is a tangible sensory pleasure in wearing a beautifully crafted piece of microengineering. The weight of the steel, the sweeping motion of the second hand, the tactile feedback of the bezel, it feels significant on your wrist.
So the core insight for anyone listening is to deeply analyze your own product, service, or even your role within your company. Ask yourself, which of these 5 primal drives am I actually satisfying for my client or my boss? Am I helping them acquire wealth, bond with their team, learn a new skill, defend their market share, or feel better about their day? And the golden secret here is layering. The more drives your offer can connect with simultaneously, like the Rolex hitting 3 at once, the more irresistible and deeply embedded your value becomes in the market.
Exactly. You want to stack those drives.
Okay, so let's say a listener has done the work, they have a business idea, they know they aren't ignoring the iron law, and they have identified that their idea clearly taps into the drive to acquire and the drive to learn. It feels good emotionally.
Okay.
But emotion isn't enough. Is there a way to coldly, mathematically evaluate if this specific market is actually worth the blood, sweat, and tears required to enter it? How do you score it objectively?
Emotion is the enemy of objective evaluation. Fortunately, the source material provides a fantastic, highly pragmatic back-of-the-napkin scoring system called the 10 Ways to Evaluate a Market.
Love a good scoring system. Yeah.
This forces you to look at the mechanics of the opportunity. You rate each of these 10 factors on a strict scale of 0 to 10. 0 means the condition is terrible. 10 means it is incredibly favorable.
Let's walk through the mechanics of all 10, because this acts as a phenomenal filter. I find it helps to group them logically. Let's look at the first 3, which really focus on the sheer demand of potential revenue. Number 1 is urgency. How badly do people want or need this right now?
Yes, urgency is key.
The pain level dictates the urgency. Renting an old movie to watch on a Tuesday night is a low urgency, maybe a 2 out of 10. If they don't rent it, life goes on.
Right.
However, if it's 2:00 a.m. and your basement pipe just burst and is currently flooding your house with sewage, your need for an emergency plumber is an absolute 10 out of 10. You aren't price shopping, you are demanding immediate relief.
Exactly. 2 is market size. How many people are actively purchasing things like this in the world?
Yeah.
You might have the best product imaginable, but if the market is minuscule, the ceiling is too low. The market for left-handed underwater basket weaving tools might be a passionate group of 3 people. That's a 0. The market for cardiovascular health solutions or mobile communication is practically the entire global population. That is a 10.
3 is pricing potential. What is the highest price a typical purchaser will willingly spend for a solution? This is crucial because it dictates your margins.
Very important.
If you are selling gourmet lollipops, your pricing potential is capped at maybe $5 or $10. You have to sell millions of them to build a large company. But if you are selling enterprise cybersecurity software or commercial real estate, a single transaction can be worth millions of dollars. High pricing potential gives you massive operational breathing room.
Now we move to the operational metrics, the cost side of the equation. 4 is the cost of customer acquisition, often called CAC. How much time, effort, and money does it take to get a stranger to buy from you?
This one trips a lot of people up.
It really does. If you open a coffee shop in a high-foot traffic airport terminal, the acquisition cost is almost 0. People just walk in because they're there. But if you are trying to sell billion-dollar defense contracts to the Pentagon, it might require millions of dollars in lobbying, years of relationship building, and massive compliance hurdles just to get a single signature.
5 is the cost of value delivery. Once you make the sale, how much does it cost you to actually create and fulfill the promise?
Right.
Delivering a digital ebook or an online course costs fractions of a cent in server bandwidth. It is incredibly efficient. Conversely, if you want to start an electric car company, the cost of value delivery requires a billion-dollar manufacturing plant, a global supply chain, and thousands of unionized workers.
The final 5 metrics deal with your competitive moat and the long-term sustainability of the venture. 6 is uniqueness of offer. How unique is your solution, and how easily can a well-funded competitor copy you?
The moat.
Yes. Anyone can buy a lawnmower and start a landscaping business tomorrow. The uniqueness is low. Very few entities have the intellectual property and capital to start a private space exploration company.
7 is speed to market. How fast can you create something tangible to sell? If you have a skill like graphic design, your speed to market is immediate. You can start offering services today. If you are developing a new pharmaceutical drug, your speed to market involves a decade of clinical trials and FDA approvals before you can make a single dollar.
8 is upfront investment. How much of your own money or borrowed money do you have to spend before you are completely ready to make your first sale? We saw the danger of massive upfront investment with the Segway's $100 million gamble.
9 is upsell potential. This is where real wealth is generated. Once a customer buys your initial offering, are there related logical things they also need to buy from you?
The razor and the blade model.
Exactly. If they buy the handle, they must continually buy the replacement blades. If you sell someone a Frisbee, they probably don't need to buy anything else from you unless they happen to throw it on a roof.
And finally, 10 evergreen potential. Once the initial offer is created, how much ongoing active work is required to continue selling it? A consulting business has low evergreen potential. If you stop working, you stop getting paid.
Right.
Writing a software program or a book means you put the heavy labor in once, and you can potentially sell licenses or copies indefinitely while you sleep.
So you take your idea and you ruthlessly score all 10 of those factors on a 0 to 10 scale. A perfect score, which is basically a unicorn, is 100.
Very rare.
The source material provides very strict thresholds for how to interpret this score. If your total score is below 50, the advice is to walk away. Cut your emotional attachment and walk away. The uphill battle against bad market physics just isn't worth your limited time on Earth. If your score is above 75, the mechanics are heavily in your favor, and you likely have a potential home run on your hands. But I have to pose a scenario that happens to almost every entrepreneur.
Let's hear it.
Let's say I do this evaluation. I'm completely objective. My idea scores an 85. The urgency is high, the market is huge, the upfront cost is low. I am thrilled. I'm ready to quit my job.
Okay.
But then I do a quick Google search just to check the landscape, and my heart sinks. I see that 3 other well-established companies are already doing exactly what I want to do. My immediate reaction, and the reaction of almost everyone, is panic. Isn't that a massive red flag? Doesn't the presence of strong competition mean I am too late, the opportunity is gone, and I should pack it up and look for a completely original idea?
That is an incredibly common reaction rooted in the fear of missing out. But logically, based on the mechanics we've been discussing, it is completely backward.
Really?
Yes, discovering established competitors is emphatically the best news you could possibly receive as an early-stage entrepreneur.
How can fighting an incumbent be good news?
Because it fundamentally de-risks your venture. Think back to our discussion on the iron law of the market and the Segway. The single biggest existential risk you face when starting a business is building something that nobody wants to buy. It is the risk of the unknown.
Right.
If you find successful, profitable competitors already operating in your space, they have just proven to you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the market exists. They have satisfied the iron law for you.
Oh, wow. They took all the expensive, terrifying risk of proving the market from scratch, and they did it for free. Being a pioneer is romantic, but pioneers often end up with arrows in their backs.
Exactly. A pure monopoly, a completely empty market, is often empty for a reason. There is no water in that well. And the hidden benefit of competition gets even better.
How so?
Because they exist, you don't have to guess what the market wants. You can now become a customer of your competitors. You can buy their products, experience their sales funnels, test their customer service, and rigorously analyze exactly what they do brilliantly and what they do terribly.
You can just go read their 1-star reviews on Amazon or Yelp. The market is literally telling you, in public, exactly what your competitors are failing to deliver.
Jacked it.
Like the product is great, but the customer service is unreachable. Boom. You just found your unique angle. You build the exact same product, but you differentiate by offering phenomenal, instant customer support.
Precisely. You use your competitors as a free, publicly funded research and development department. You step in, target the specific gaps in their value delivery, and carve out your niche.
Yeah.
So the operational advice here is to score your ideas rigorously, but embrace the discovery of competitors. Do not run away from them. Study them like a scientist studying an organism.
So you are out there actively scoring these markets, studying the competitors, decoding the human drives. But while you are doing all this external analysis, you have to protect yourself from your own internal psychology.
Very true.
The source material outlines 2 fatal entrepreneurial mindsets that will destroy a venture before it even begins. They're called the mercenary rule and the crusader rule.
These are the two major psychological traps of entrepreneurship, and they represent two opposite extremes of motivation. The mercenary rule is straightforward. Do not start a business only for the money.
Any other.
The crusader rule is the polar opposite. Do not start a business based only on a fascinating idea without an objective evaluation of the market.
Let's dissect why both of those extremes ultimately fail in the real world. Let's start with the mercenary. This is the person who is constantly chasing the latest trend. A few years ago, it was, I heard crypto is making people billionaires, I'm going to start a crypto company.
Right.
Then it was, dropshipping is easy passive income, I'll do that. Now is, I'll just launch an AI startup. They have no actual interest in the underlying technology or the customers. You just want the payout. Why does the pure mercenary inevitably fail?
They fail because they dramatically underestimate the friction of reality. Building a business, even a simple one, is incredibly difficult. It requires persistent, grinding iteration.
It's hard work.
You have to deal with vendors who don't deliver, customers who complain, software bugs, and complex legal structures. There is a concept in startup culture often called the trough of sorrow, the long, grueling period after the initial excitement wears off, where nothing seems to be working and the money isn't flowing yet.
It's the unglamorous trench warfare of business.
Exactly. And the pure mercenary will quit the moment they hit the trough of sorrow. Why wouldn't they? They don't actually care about the work itself or the problem they're solving. They just wanted easy money. And when they realize the money isn't easy, they abandon ship and look for the next get-rich-quick scheme. They lack the intrinsic motivation required to push through the inevitable friction.
Okay, so if the mercenary lacks passion, the crusader has too much of it. The crusader is the visionary who just loves their idea and wants to change the world. They're completely obsessed with their product. Why does the crusader fail?
The pure crusader often goes bankrupt because they lack objectivity. Because they are so deeply emotionally attached to their vision, they refuse to pivot when the market tells them through a lack of sales that nobody wants it.
Oh, like the segue again.
They are the inventors of the segue. They ignore the 10 ways to evaluate a market because they are blinded by their own passion. If the market rejects them, they don't change the product. They blame the market for not being smart enough to understand their genius.
So the mercenary quits because it's too hard, and the crusader goes bankrupt because they refuse to change. Where is the sweet spot? How do you balance these forces?
Well, the source material makes a really interesting point about the value of boring businesses.
Boring businesses. Like what?
Things like commercial garbage collection, B2B plumbing supplies, commercial dry cleaning, or specialized accounting software. These industries aren't going to get you on the cover of a magazine, but they can be incredibly, quietly lucrative.
Right, because they solve real problems.
They are lucrative precisely because they naturally force a balance. If you can find the operational challenge of running a commercial plumbing business, intellectually interesting, optimizing the logistics, building a great culture, improving the dispatch software, you avoid the mercenary trap.
Because you're actually engaged.
You are engaged in the actual day-to-day work, so you won't quit when it gets hard. But you also avoid the crusader trap because the market demand is highly objective, undeniable, and urgent. People will always need plumbers. You aren't trying to force a wild, unproven vision onto the world.
Conversely, if you have a massive crusader-type passion, say you are deeply passionate about writing avant-garde, experimental poetry, that is a beautiful thing. But that is a weekend side project.
Exactly.
You should pursue it vigorously, but you absolutely should not rely on it to pay your rent or feed your family until you have empirically proven that a paying market exists for it. I think about this a lot like choosing a life partner.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
If you marry someone purely for their money and status, the mercenary approach, you eventually end up miserable. Because when the daily reality of living together sets in, you realize you don't actually care for the person sitting across from you at the breakfast table.
True.
But if you marry blindly, based on a fleeting, highly impractical, fiery passion, without ever having a serious conversation about how you will manage finances or where you will live, the crusader approach, you often end up in a massive, catastrophic crash when reality hits.
Yeah.
You need that practical, grounded middle ground.
That analogy holds up perfectly. The practical application is to hunt for an attractive market that interests you enough to keep you engaged and curious during the inevitable hard times, but to remain emotionally detached and objective enough to ensure the market mechanics will actually pay the bills.
Okay, so let's summarize the journey so far. You have rejected the illusion of the MBA. You understand the 5 parts of a business. You have the right mindset. You aren't a pure mercenary. You aren't a blind crusader. You have analyzed the primal human drives, and you have used the 10-point system to find a hungry market with great mechanics. Now we arrive at the execution. What exact physical or digital form will your value take? How do you actually package this solution and hand it to the customer?
The author details 12 standard forms of value that businesses traditionally use. These include things like subscriptions, where you pay for ongoing access, leases, where you rent an asset, agency, where you act on someone else's behalf, and capital, where you invest money for a return.
But we're focusing on 2 mainly, right?
Yes, to really understand the fundamental mechanics of leverage and scale, we are going to focus deeply on the 2 most foundational forms, products and services. Understanding the structural difference between these 2 dictates the entire lifestyle and operational reality of your business.
The absolute classics. Let's start with a product. A product is a tangible, discrete form of value. The defining characteristic of a product is that you create it once, and then you can duplicate it and sell it multiple times. The perfect meta-example is the source material we are discussing right now, a book. The author spent hundreds, maybe thousands of hours agonizing over the research, the writing, and the editing. That is a massive upfront investment of time. But after the master copy is finalized, it can be printed on paper or digitized into an ebook or an audiobook and sold millions of times.
And that points to the massive overriding advantage of a product-based business. It scales beautifully. Your personal revenue is decoupled from your hours worked.
Right.
Once the product exists, selling the 1,000th unit requires exponentially less effort than selling the first unit. You have leverage. Software is the ultimate modern expression of this. You write the code once, and you can deploy it to 10 million users with almost 0 marginal cost.
However, there's a brutal trade-off, isn't there? Because products usually require massive upfront capital and time before you see a single dollar of return. If you want to build a physical product, you have to pay for industrial design, prototyping, tooling, manufacturing minimums, warehousing, and inventory, all before you have proven that anyone will actually buy the finished item. You are taking on immense financial risk on the front end.
Exactly. And even with digital products like software, you might have to spend 6 months writing code without getting paid, hoping it sells. Which brings us to the second foundational form of value, which is the service.
Okay, tell me about services.
A service involves providing human help, assistance, or specialized labor to someone else. A barbershop, a massage therapist, a graphic design consultant, or a highly trained heart surgeon, these are all service providers.
But wait, if we just established that the holy grail of business is leverage and scale, the ability to decouple time from money, then services seem fundamentally flawed. If a heart surgeon, no matter how brilliant, can only physically perform 3 complex surgeries a day, their income is strictly capped by the hours in a day. They are directly trading time for money. Why would any rational entrepreneur choose to start a service business instead of a product business if it fundamentally doesn't scale?
Because the inverse trade-off is often exactly what an early-stage entrepreneur needs. Services have 2 massive advantages: incredibly low upfront financial investment and lightning-fast speed to market. You can start a service business tomorrow morning for absolutely $0.
Let's play that out. How fast can we do this?
If you possess a skill, say you know how to navigate complex tax codes or you know how to build highly converting Shopify websites, you do not need a factory. You do not need inventory. You do not need to wait 6 months. You can physically walk out your front door today, find a local business that has a terrible, outdated website, walk inside, and offer your service to rebuild it for them. If they say yes, you are instantly in business. The friction to generate your first dollar of cash flow is almost non-existent.
That is a powerful distinction. So the operational advice isn't that one is inherently better than the other. It is about matching the form of value to your current personal resources.
Precisely.
If you have 0 capital, but you have time and a specific skill, you should absolutely start a service business. Use it to get cash flowing immediately. Learn the market intimately by dealing directly with clients and build your confidence. But if you have access to capital and your ultimate goal is infinite scale and wealth generation without trading your hours, you must invest the time and money to build a scalable product.
Or the hybrid approach.
Oh, what's that?
Start as a service to generate cash, learn exactly what the clients need, and then use that cash to build a software product that automates the service you are providing.
Brilliant. That is the evolutionary path of many massive companies. They start by doing things that don't scale to learn the market, and then they productize their knowledge.
Exactly. If we step back and connect all of these seemingly disparate concepts into the bigger picture, it brings us to a profound synthesis of what this chapter is truly trying to communicate.
Let's bring it all home.
What we have dismantled today is the myth that business is some esoteric, highly abstracted financial science. It is not reserved for Ivy League elites playing with derivatives, and it is not about treating human beings like cogs in an industrial machine.
It is not about stopwatches, and it is not about complex spreadsheets designed to extract value from failing companies.
No, it is a highly practical, deeply human psychological process. It is about identifying a primal, hardwired, unmet human drive, whether that is the profound need to acquire security, bond with a tribe, or feel joy. It is about using objective, cold evaluation to find a viable market where that need is urgent. And it is about efficiently delivering a tangible form of value, a product or a service that genuinely makes another human being's life better.
And the ultimate realization here, the core truth that we want you to take away from this deep dive, is empowerment. You do not need permission from a corporate gatekeeper to create value.
You really don't.
And you certainly do not need to mortgage your future for a $150,000 piece of paper to validate your ideas or your worth in the marketplace. By mastering these foundational primal concepts, from the interdependent 5 parts of business to the unforgiving reality of the iron law of the market, you already possess the intellectual architecture required to build a self-sustaining, thriving venture.
The barriers to entry in the modern economy are almost entirely psychological. Once you understand the raw mechanics of how value is created and exchanged, the fear dissipates, and the execution becomes a matter of testing and iterating.
So you have a deep understanding of the mechanics. You have evaluated your market objectively, avoiding the emotional traps of the mercenary and the crusader. You understand the deep evolutionary drives of your customers, and you have crafted a brilliant, scalable product to solve their burning problems. The engine is built, it's fueled, and it's ready to go.
Sounds perfect.
But what happens if you turn the key and absolutely no one is watching? What happens if you have built the greatest solution in the world, but you are screaming into a void? Next time, we are diving deep into the biological and psychological mechanics of human attention, exploring how to make people actually care and look your way in a world overwhelmed by endless, deafening distractions. You absolutely will not want to miss it. What if literally everything you thought you needed to know to succeed in business was just wrong?
Oh, that is a huge question to start with.
I mean, think about it. We get told we need these impenetrable financial formulas, right? Or all this crazy corporate leadership jargon.
Yeah, synergy and all that.
Exactly. Or, the classic $150,000 piece of paper from some elite university.
The MBA.
Right. What if that was actually the very thing holding you back from real success?
It completely flips the script on how we are conditioned to view the corporate world. I mean, we're raised to treat business like it's this incredibly complicated, esoteric science, It's
Totally.
like it should only be handled by people who spent a decade in higher education.
We really do treat it like this exclusive club. You get the sense that you have to mortgage your life, sit in a lecture hall for years, and just learn to speak exclusively in pivot tables to even get a seat at the table.
Just to be allowed to try.
Right. But welcome, everyone, to today's deep dive. We're getting right to the core of Josh Kaufman's book, The Personal MBA.
Which is such a great resource.
It really is. And specifically, we're focusing on the foundational roadmap he lays out early on. It's the section titled, What You'll Learn in This Book.
And our mission for this conversation is to completely demystify what a business actually is.
Yes, break it all down.
Right. The goal is to take this massive, intimidating subject and break it into 3, highly accessible pillars.
Okay, what are the pillars?
So first, how businesses actually work mechanically. Second, how the people inside and outside of them tick psychologically. And third, how complex systems operate in the real world.
So for you listening, whether you're an entrepreneur trying to get a startup off the ground or an artist trying to figure out how to monetize your craft.
Or even if you're a professional just navigating the corporate ladder, aiming for a promotion.
Exactly. Understanding this core framework is essentially the ultimate cure for imposter syndrome.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the proof that you don't need a fancy credential to master the art of business.
Because that imposter syndrome is so pervasive, right? People look at massively successful companies. I mean, your Apples, your Amazons.
It's a giants.
Yeah, and they assume there must be some sort of wizardry going on behind closed doors, or they view business purely as a financial vehicle, like this sterile environment where you just move money around spreadsheets all day.
Which sounds awful, honestly.
Right, but the source text strips all that magic away. The foundational definition of a business is just remarkably grounded.
Okay, so what is the definition?
It argues that a business is simply a repeatable process that consists of 5 interdependent parts.
A repeatable process. I like that framing because it kind of takes the emotion and the ego right out of it.
It really does.
It's not about being some visionary genius. It's about building a machine that runs predictably.
Yes.
So let's break down those 5 parts.
Yeah.
Because if this is the entire engine of commerce, we need to know how the cylinders fire.
Well, the very first part, and honestly the one that everything else rests on, is value creation.
Value creation, meaning what exactly?
This is the act of discovering what people actually need or want, and then creating a solution to fill that gap.
Okay, finding a problem and solving it.
Right. You have to offer something of tangible or intangible value. And I know it sounds obvious, but so many people start companies based on what they want to build rather than what the world actually needs.
Right, because if you aren't creating value, you aren't a business. You're just like taking up space. You're a hobbyist.
Exactly.
But creating the thing isn't enough, which is kind of the great tragedy of so many brilliant inventors. Like, you can build the most incredible machine in your garage, but if the garage door stays closed, it doesn't matter.
Which brings us directly to the second part, marketing.
Marketing.
And we should define marketing clearly here because it's not just running ads.
Right.
Once you have created something valuable, marketing is the act of attracting attention and building demand for that specific creation.
It's getting people to look.
Yeah, it's the mechanism of making sure the people who actually need your value know it exists. If they don't know about it, the value is essentially zero in the marketplace.
So marketing gets them in the door. It gets their eyes on the product. But, someone looking through the window of a shop doesn't keep the lights on.
Right. They have to actually buy it. That's where the third part comes in, sales.
Okay, marketing versus sales.
Yeah. Marketing grabs the attention, but sales is the actual process of turning those prospective, curious onlookers into paying customers.
It is the moment of transaction.
Exactly. It's the mutual agreement where the customer decides that the value you've created is worth more to them than the money they have in their pocket.
I think people often conflate marketing and sales, but they really are 2 distinct muscles, aren't they?
Oh, completely.
Like, marketing is broadcasting, but sales is closing. So you've built the thing, you got people to pay attention to it, and you successfully convinced them to hand over their money. Now you actually have to make good on your promise.
And that is part 4, value delivery.
Delivery.
This is the fulfillment stage. You have to actually give the customer what you promised them during the marketing and sales phases, and you have to ensure they are satisfied.
Because if you fail here...
You might have made a quick buck, yeah, but you've destroyed the trust required to make it a repeatable process.
Right, like a restaurant that serves terrible food but has great marketing. I mean, they'll only ever get a customer to eat there once.
Exactly. It's not a sustainable business. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle.
Which is?
Finance.
The money part.
Right. This is the act of bringing in enough money to keep the entire 5-part process going while making your own effort actually worthwhile.
So you have to capture enough of the value you created to sustain the operation, pay for the marketing.
Cover the cost of delivery and still have enough left over to survive.
Okay, so just to recap. Value creation, marketing, sales, value delivery, and finance.
That's the 5.
When you look at it from 10,000 feet, it's remarkably straightforward.
It really is. But the text makes a crucial point about these 5 elements. They are entirely interdependent.
Interdependent, meaning they all rely on each other.
Right. If you remove even one of those pillars, the entire structure doesn't just wobble, it completely collapses.
So what happens if a piece is missing?
The author lays out the consequences beautifully. Like, if you try to run a business without value creation, you aren't an entrepreneur, you are running a scam.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're taking money for nothing.
Exactly. Now, if you have value but you take away marketing, you just have a flop because you're shouting into the void. Nobody knows you're there.
And if you take away sales, you have an audience, but no revenue.
Yeah.
You've basically created a nonprofit or just a very expensive hobby.
Right. And if you fail at value delivery, you destroy your reputation, which means your future sales drop to zero.
And finally, finance.
Right. If you ignore finance, if you aren't capturing enough value to sustain the operation, the business simply suffocates and dies. Every single business failure can be traced back to a breakdown in one of these 5 areas.
But out of all 5, there is one that kind of dictates whether the other 4 even have a chance to exist, right?
Oh, definitely.
The text introduces this concept called the iron law of the market. And I gotta say, it is a cold, unforgiving reality check for anyone who thinks their brilliant idea is just guaranteed to succeed.
It's the ultimate filter. The iron law of the market dictates that if you do not have a large group of people who desperately want what you have to offer, your chances of building a viable business are effectively zero. Zero. The market just doesn't care about your passion. It doesn't care how smart your engineering is or, how much time you spent designing the logo. A market that does not exist cannot be convinced to buy.
The text highlights this with the story of Dean Kamen and the Segway PT.
Yes, it's such a great example.
And for anyone who doesn't know Dean Kamen, we are talking about a prolific, world-class inventor here.
Oh, yeah.
This is the man who created the first wearable insulin pump. He's a legitimate genius.
Yeah.
And he poured an estimated $100 million into developing the Segway.
$100 million in research and development. Just let that sink in.
It's staggering.
And purely from an engineering standpoint, the Segway was an absolute marvel. It was this 2-wheeled, self-balancing scooter packed with gyroscopes and tilt sensors. It was incredibly sophisticated.
Right. And when they were gearing up to launch it, around 2002, I think, the hype was astronomical.
Oh, it was everywhere.
Kamen himself suggested it would revolutionize personal transportation in the exact same way the automobile replaced the horse and buggy.
The expectations were stratospheric. They projected they were going to sell 50,000 units every single year.
50,000 a year.
Yeah. But the reality was a brutal awakening. Over the first 5 years, they didn't sell 50,000 a year. They sold a grand total of 23,000 units across the entire 5-year span.
Wow. Across 5 years.
Yeah. They hit less than 10% of their initial goal.
And what's crucial to understand here is that the technology didn't fail, right?
No, not at all.
Like, the product worked exactly as it was advertised. It was environmentally friendly. It was a technological breakthrough. It balanced perfectly.
Yeah, the problem was entirely the market.
Right.
People simply did not want to pay $5,000 for a slightly goofy-looking alternative to walking. The massive, hungry demographic of urban commuters that Kamen envisioned, it just wasn't there.
Let me push back on this, though, because, we are constantly fed this narrative that a business is primarily about creating a revolutionary, high-quality product.
Right, the better mousetrap.
Exactly. The old saying, if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. So shouldn't incredible engineering naturally manifest its own market eventually? Like, if you build a flawless product, won't people eventually realize they need it?
Well, the better mousetrap myth is actually incredibly dangerous for entrepreneurs.
Really?
Yeah. The flaw in that logic is assuming that quality alone creates demand. Think about it this way. Engineering perfection doesn't change human behavior if the problem it solves isn't a painful one.
Okay, I see.
Walking just wasn't a painful enough problem for the average person to justify spending $5,000 and trying to navigate a bulky device on crowded sidewalks.
So this sounds like you're saying a company could build like a multi-million-dollar, structurally flawless, architecturally perfect bridge in the middle of the Sahara Desert.
Right.
The engineering could be breathtaking. It could win awards.
Yeah.
But it's completely useless if there's no river to cross and no traffic to use it.
I'd take that analogy a step further, actually. It's not just that there's no river, it's that you can't force the nomads in the desert to suddenly need a bridge just because you spent a lot of money building one.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Engineering perfection in a desert is exactly what the Segway was. Without that first foundational element, a market that actually desires the value creation, the other 4 parts of the business are paralyzed.
They just sit there.
Right. You can hire the best marketing agency in the world, recruit a slick sales team, have flawless value delivery, and perfect financial accounting. But if nobody wants to cross the bridge, the business is dead on arrival.
So if you're trying to launch a startup right now or pitching a new initiative at your company, the immediate takeaway is that you must never start with the product. You have to start by auditing the market.
Yes. Before you write a single line of code, or spend $1 on inventory, you have to rigorously evaluate the idea.
And how do you do that?
Well, the text provides specific criteria for this, starting with urgency.
Urgency, okay.
Yeah. How badly do people want or need this right now? For example, renting an old movie from a catalog is, a low urgency desire. But getting access to a brand new blockbuster on opening weekend or finding a plumber when your basement is actively flooding, that is extreme urgency.
That makes totally sense. And the second major criterion is market size, right?
Exactly. How many people are actively spending money to solve this specific problem?
So, the market for specialized underwater basket weaving tools is microscopic.
Right, almost non-existent.
But the market for back pain relief, or data security, is massive.
That's the critical metric. If your idea scores low on urgency and low on market size, you are picking a fight with the iron law of the market. And the iron law has never lost a fight.
But, if business fundamentally relies on creating value for a market, we kind of have to pause and define what a market actually is.
We do.
Because a market isn't a spreadsheet. It isn't a line graph or an abstract economic model. A market is a messy, unpredictable, highly emotional collection of human beings.
It's just people.
Right. And you can't build a business if you don't understand the biology of the people buying from it.
This is where the text makes a really brilliant pivot from the mechanics of a business into the psychological realities of it.
Which is pillar number 2.
Exactly. Businesses are built by people, and they exist exclusively to serve people. If you refuse to understand human nature, you are flying blind.
The source material dives deep into what it calls core human drives. It basically argues that beneath all the complex rationalizations we make, every single purchase or decision is ultimately fueled by deep-seated evolutionary biology.
It borrows heavily from evolutionary psychology here. Paul Lawrence and Nitin Noria at Harvard Business School originally identified 4 core drives, and Josh Kaufman adds a vital 5th.
Okay, so what are they?
Well, these drives are the legacy of our ancestors surviving on the savannah. The first is the drive to acquire.
Acquire, like getting stuff.
Right. This is the primal desire to gather resources, to obtain physical objects, but it also extends to immaterial things like status, power, and social influence.
So when you look at retail stores or investment brokerages or luxury fashion brands, they aren't really selling clothes or stocks, are they? They are directly targeting that drive to acquire.
Yes, they are selling resource accumulation and status signaling.
Fascinating. And the second drive?
The second drive is the drive to bond. Humans are pack animals, right? We don't survive alone, so we have this overwhelming desire to feel valued, loved, and connected to others.
Yeah, I see where this is going.
Dating apps, local pubs, industry conferences, even social media networks, they're all monetizing our biological need to be connected to a tribe.
Okay, the third drive is the drive to learn. We have this innate curiosity to understand our environment because, historically, understanding the environment meant surviving it.
Which is the exact drive we're satisfying with this deep dive, actually.
Oh, true.
Yeah, book publishers, academic institutions, online courses, they all promise to satisfy that itch to make sense of the world.
And then there is the drive to defend.
Right.
This is the ancient impulse to protect ourselves, our families, our property, and our reputations from threats.
That one is literally everywhere. Home alarm systems, life insurance, martial arts classes, even legal services, they're all just selling the feeling of safety.
And the fifth drive, the one Kaufman added to the model.
The drive to feel.
Feel.
Yeah, beyond just surviving, humans crave sensory stimulus. We want intense emotional experiences, pleasure, and excitement. The entire entertainment industry, movies, concerts, video games, theme parks, it all exists entirely to feed this drive.
So if you distill all of this down, every successful business in the world is essentially selling some combination of money, status, love, knowledge, protection, or pleasure.
That's it. When you view consumerism through this lens, it explains so much of our seemingly irrational behavior.
Right.
There's an old marketing adage that people don't buy a quarter-inch drill bit, they buy a quarter-inch hole.
I've heard that one.
But if you apply these core human drives, it goes even deeper. They aren't buying the hole. They are buying the hole so they can hang a beautiful piece of art on the wall to make their home look sophisticated, so that when they host a dinner party, they impress their friends.
Oh.
They bought a piece of metal, but they are actually satisfying the drive to bond and the drive to acquire status.
It completely changes how you look at a product.
It really does.
But the text doesn't just stop at what motivates us. It spends a significant amount of time exploring what limits us.
Ah, yes, the biological constraints.
Right. It brings in these fascinating concepts like caveman syndrome and willpower depletion. And to illustrate this, it references Dr. Walter Mischel's famous marshmallow experiment, which I find absolutely endlessly fascinating.
It's one of the most famous psychological studies of the 20th century for good reason.
Remind me how it goes.
So back in the 1960s at Stanford, Dr. Mischel would bring a small child into a barren room. And on the table, there was a single fluffy marshmallow.
Okay.
He would tell the child, I have to leave the room for about 15 minutes. If you can wait until I come back without eating this marshmallow, I will give you a second one. And then he would walk out.
Oh, man. If you've ever seen the archival footage of these experiments, it is both hilarious and agonizing.
It really is.
These poor kids are just going through torture. They're covering their eyes. They are kicking the desk. They're singing songs, smelling the marshmallow, doing absolutely anything to distract their primitive brains from the immediate gratification of eating it.
The struggle you see in those videos is the physical manifestation of cognitive friction.
Cognitive friction.
Yeah. The profound insight from Mischel's work wasn't just about childhood impatience. It proved that willpower is not a fixed personality trait. It is a highly finite biological resource.
Meaning you can run out of it.
Exactly. Think of it like a gas tank in your car. Every time you resist a temptation, suppress an emotional impulse, or force yourself to make a difficult decision, you burn a little bit of that fuel. By the end of the day, the tank is empty.
Which has massive implications for how you run a business.
Oh, huge.
It means you absolutely cannot build a model that relies on your customers, or your employees for that matter, constantly fighting their own nature to engage with your product.
Precisely. If using your software requires a 10-step confusing checkout process, you are actively draining the customer's willpower tank.
They just give up.
Right. If your product requires them to break a deeply ingrained daily habit to use it, you are demanding willpower. And eventually, they will run out of gas and abandon your product for whatever requires the least amount of cognitive effort.
But let me throw a philosophical hurdle at you.
Okay, go for it.
If humans are driven by these intense primal urges to acquire, bond, and feel, and we also suffer from this rapidly depleting tank of willpower, doesn't targeting these biological realities mean that business and marketing are essentially just forms of manipulation?
That's a deep question.
I keep thinking about the analogy the text uses from P.J. The Horse and Rider. The idea is that the primitive emotional brain is this massive, powerful horse, and our conscious, logical mind is just a tiny rider sitting on top, pretending to be in control. Is business just the dark art of tricking the horse?
It's a very valid concern, and, it's a fear a lot of first-time entrepreneurs struggle with. But the text draws a hard line between manipulation and alignment.
Alignment.
Yeah. You aren't tricking the horse. The horse is massive, and it is going to run in the direction of its core drives regardless of what you do. Good business isn't about forcing the horse off a cliff. It's about clearing the path so the horse naturally desires to walk in the direction of the value you're offering.
So it's about removing friction, not creating illusions.
Exactly. To understand this, we have to look at the psychological mechanisms the book explains, specifically perceptual control and absence blindness.
What are ours?
Well, because of our limited brain power, humans inherently filter out and ignore anything that doesn't help us achieve our current immediate goals. That's perceptual control.
Well, it's like when you decide to buy a specific type of car, say, a blue Honda Civic.
Right.
Certainly everywhere you drive, you see blue Honda Civics. They were always there, but your brain was filtering them out until they became relevant to your goals.
That's exactly it. And the flip side of that coin is absence blindness.
Meaning we don't see what's missing.
Right. It is incredibly difficult for the human brain to notice what isn't there. We can spot a threat right in front of us, but we struggle to identify the absence of a safety measure until it's too late.
So how does this tie back to the horse?
When you combine these two concepts, the lesson is clear. You cannot force someone to care about your product if it doesn't align with their existing drives. Your marketing has to map the value you provide directly to the desires they already inherently possess. You have to make your product visible to their perceptual control.
So the practical application of this is immediate. If you're tinkering with an idea in your garage, or if you're trying to figure out why your current project isn't getting traction, you have to stop looking at the features of the product and start mapping it to those core human drives.
Yes, absolutely.
Like if you're selling a $10,000 luxury watch, you have to wake up and realize you are not in the business of timekeeping. Nobody on Earth needs a mechanical watch to know what time it is. We all have smartphones in our pockets that sync to atomic clocks.
Exactly. When you sell a luxury watch, you are selling the drive to acquire status. You are selling a wearable signal to the rest of the world that the buyer is successful, powerful, and belongs to a certain social strata.
Once you internalize what underlying drive you are actually serving, everything about how you build, package, and communicate that product shifts dramatically.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
But let's say you nail this. You create a product that perfectly appeals to a core human drive. You've aligned with the horse.
Right, you've got the people part down.
Now you face a completely different, heavily logistical challenge. How do you deliver that value reliably, day after day, to thousands or millions of unpredictable human beings without physically destroying yourself in the process?
That is the bottleneck of human limitation. And it brings us to the invisible architecture of business.
The third foundational pillar.
Right, how systems work.
Because the moment a business scales past a handful of customers, sheer effort just isn't enough anymore.
No, it's a recipe for burnout. The text argues that every business is, at its core, a complex system that exists within an even more complex environment.
Okay, let's define system.
A system is just a self-perpetuating arrangement of interconnected parts that form a unified whole. Your body is a system. The global economy is a system. And your business must become a system.
The book introduces a concept here that completely shattered how I view startups. It's called Gall's Law.
Ah, Gall's Law. It's named after the systems theorist John Gall, and it is a phenomenal observation.
What does it say?
It states that a complex system that actually works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that works.
Okay, start simple.
But the really devastating part is the inverse. A complex system designed from scratch never works and cannot be patched up to make it work.
Never works.
Never. You have to completely scrap it and start over, beginning with a simple, functioning system.
This explains so much failure in the corporate world. You see these massive corporate IT overhauls or these incredibly well-funded startups that try to launch with a platform that has 1,000 features on day one, and they just spectacularly crash and burn.
Because they tried to build a Boeing 747 from scratch and expected it to fly flawlessly on the first attempt. Gall's Law tells us you can't do that.
The world is too messy.
Right, the complexity of the real world introduces too many variables. You have to start by building a skateboard.
A skateboard.
Yeah. Once the skateboard works and proves its value, you figure out how to add a steering column and turn it into a scooter. Then you add a motor. Then you enclose it. Businesses must iterate. They have to start simple, prove the core value delivery, and only add complexity when the simple system is running smoothly.
And as you build these systems, they have to be able to regulate themselves, which requires understanding feedback loops.
Yes. Every system operates with inflows and outflows, things going in, things coming out. A feedback loop exists whenever the output of a system becomes the new input for the next cycle.
Okay, give me an example.
The classic, universally understood example of a balancing feedback loop is a thermostat in your house.
Right. You set the thermostat to 70 degrees. If a draft comes in and the room drops to 68, the thermostat senses the output, the cold air, and uses that data as an input to turn on the furnace. The furnace heats the room, and once the output reaches 70 again, the new input tells the system to shut off. It balances itself.
That's a healthy system. But in business, we frequently encounter reinforcing feedback loops, and these can be incredibly dangerous.
How so?
This is where the output amplifies the system with each cycle, creating a compounding effect that leads to either runaway, unsustainable growth, or catastrophic decay.
Think of a vicious price war between two airlines. Airline A drops its ticket prices by $20 to steal market share. Airline B sees that output and uses it as an input to drop their prices by $30 to strike back. Airline A retaliates again.
It becomes a race to the bottom. It's a reinforcing feedback loop that will literally drive profit margins into the ground until one of the systems completely runs out of cash and bankrupts itself.
And understanding the delicate nature of these systems is vital, because the text brings up a very sobering reality called normal accidents.
This comes from complexity theory. The concept of normal accidents dictates that in any highly complex, tightly coupled system, catastrophic failures are not a matter of if, but when.
When? Wow.
Yeah. The more moving parts you have, the more dependencies you weave into your business, the more mathematically certain it becomes that an unexpected interaction between those parts will trigger a cascade of failures.
It's why supply chains broke down so spectacularly a few years ago. One boat gets stuck in a canal, and suddenly you can't buy microchips on the other side of the planet.
Exactly.
But let me play devil's advocate here,
Sure.
because this all sounds very sterile and bureaucratic. Can't a highly talented, visionary entrepreneur just hustle their way to success? Do we really need to formalize every single action into systems and processes?
A lot of people think that.
Right? I keep imagining a master chef in a high-end kitchen. They don't need a corporate process manual to cook a brilliant, life-changing meal. They rely on their raw talent, their palate, and their sheer hustle.
I love that chef analogy because it actually proves the exact point the text is making.
How so?
You are absolutely right. If we're talking about cooking one brilliant meal or maybe running a small dinner service for 20 people, talent and hustle are enough. But what happens to that single master chef when the restaurant suddenly needs to cook 1,000 intricate meals a night all by themselves?
Well, they hit a physical wall, the kitchen catches fire, the orders get backed up, and they physically collapse.
Precisely. You cannot stale hustle. Hustle has a hard biological ceiling.
Okay, that makes sense.
This is the fundamental reason why a company like McDonald's dominates the globe. McDonald's doesn't succeed because they hire the best culinary chefs in the world.
Definitely not.
No. They succeed because they took the process of making a hamburger and systematized it so perfectly that they can duplicate it millions of times a day in hundreds of different countries with high school students running the kitchen.
Wow.
They systematize the value delivery so it no longer relies on the sheer talent of one individual.
Because if you don't systematize, you leave your business incredibly vulnerable to human frailty. You fall victim to a concept in the book known as garbage in, garbage out.
Yes. If your system relies on bad data, or in the case of our chef, if it relies on an exhausted human running on 3 hours of sleep and an empty willpower tank, the output of the system is going to be terrible.
Regardless of how much underlying talent that person possesses.
Exactly. Systems are the armor that protects a business from the inevitable frailty of human beings.
So the mindset shift here is profound. You have to stop looking at your daily work as a random series of isolated tasks on a to-do list and start viewing your work environment as a functioning system.
And the moment you start looking at your work through the lens of a system, you unlock the ability to spot the constraints.
The bottlenecks, the places where the system chokes.
Right. According to the theory of constraints, every single system is limited in its performance by its slowest or most restrictive part.
Give me a visual for that.
Imagine a factory assembly line. You have a station that builds widgets and a station that paints widgets. If your building station can produce 100 widgets an hour, but your painting station can only physically paint 20 widgets an hour.
Your total is just 20 widgets.
The total throughput of your entire factory is 20 widgets, period. The text urges you to find that single choke point in your daily workflow and focus 100% of your optimization efforts right there.
Because if you speed up anything else, it's actually worse than useless. Like if you buy a new machine that lets the builders make 200 widgets an hour, you haven't helped the business.
No, you've heard it.
You've just created a massive, expensive pile of unfinished inventory sitting in front of the painting station.
It is entirely counterproductive to optimize anything other than the constraint.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at where we are. We have rigorously mapped out the actual mechanical necessities of business. We've explored value creation and the unforgiving iron law of the market.
Right.
We've dissected people, digging into evolutionary biology and core human drives. We've navigated systems, unpacking Gall's law and constraints. Which brings us to the massive elephant in the room.
What about everything else?
Exactly. What about the heavily theoretical, highly technical, incredibly complicated stuff that elite MBA programs spend 2 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars drilling into students' heads?
The stuff that scares everybody away.
Right. That brings us to our fourth key idea. What you won't learn in this book, and crucially, why leaving that stuff out is actually a massive advantage.
Josh Kaufman sets extremely specific boundaries in this chapter. He tells the reader right out of the gate what to avoid expecting.
Like what?
You are not going to find chapters dedicated to management and leadership overload. You are not going to find deep finance and accounting. And you will certainly not find highly complex quantitative analysis.
Which, to someone steeped in corporate culture, sounds almost blasphemous. Isn't that the very definition of what business is?
That is what business schools have decided to teach over the last 50 years, but it is not what a business fundamentally is.
Okay, clarify that.
The text makes a rather profound philosophical argument. Management and leadership are merely means to an end. They are tools. They are not the end itself. You
Okay.
could be the most charismatic, inspiring, brilliant leader on the planet. You could effectively manage your team to build that flawless bridge in the middle of the Sahara Desert. But your leadership is ultimately useless because you failed at the prime directive, value creation.
You essentially motivated everyone to sprint very efficiently in the exact wrong direction.
Yes. And the text offers a devastating, historically grounded critique of traditional business schools, particularly regarding their obsession with complex quantitative analysis and heavily leveraged finance.
The historical context here is fascinating. The text traces this obsession all the way back to the Industrial Revolution and a man named Frederick Winslow Taylor, right?
Yes, yes, the father of scientific management.
He was the guy walking around factories with a stopwatch, trying to shave 3 seconds off the time it took a workman to lift a piece of iron, treating human beings like literal cogs in a machine.
That Taylorist mindset, the belief that everything can be perfectly measured, optimized, and controlled from the top down, mutated over the decades.
How so?
In modern MBA programs, it evolved into a reliance on deeply abstracted financial formulas. Executives are taught to manage companies using calculus-level statistical models, things like Black-Scholes option pricing models or the Gaussian copula function.
Okay, we need to pause and explain what those actually are, because they sound like alien technology. What is a Gaussian copula?
Well, without getting into the heavy math, the Gaussian copula is a formula that Wall Street used to try and predict the probability of multiple things going wrong at the exact same time.
Like what kind of things?
Specifically, they used it to predict if thousands of different home mortgages would default simultaneously. The formula tried to put a single, neat number on human behavior.
But human behavior isn't neat.
Not at all.
The formula basically assumed that if someone in Florida defaulted on their house, it wouldn't affect someone in Nevada defaulting on theirs. It assumed people act perfectly rationally and independently.
And Black-Scholes is similar. It's a formula for pricing financial options, but it only works if you assume the market is perfectly frictionless and that extreme, unpredictable events basically never happen.
Which they do.
Exactly. These formulas mistake the map for the territory. They create models of reality that are so heavily abstracted they completely ignore the messy, real-world human psychology we talked about earlier.
And these are the exact mathematical formulas that Wall Street relied on right before the entire global economy melted down in the 2008 financial crash.
That's the text's central critique. When executives are armed exclusively with deep finance backgrounds, they often do not understand ground-level operations, and they certainly don't understand value creation.
But they do understand how to manipulate spreadsheets.
Precisely. So what happens? They unintentionally gut perfectly viable companies. They fire the customer service team, they slash the quality of the raw materials, they delay vital maintenance.
All to manipulate the spreadsheet and hit short-term quarterly earnings targets to inflate the stock price.
It's the illusion of business. It is financial wizardry prioritized over actual value creation.
But again, let me challenge this simplification because it feels like a very fine line to walk.
Okay.
Aren't we dangerously dumbing down the concept of business by telling people they can completely ignore deep finance and quantitative analysis?
Yeah.
Isn't it reckless to tell a new entrepreneur, don't worry about the heavy math?
I see what you're saying.
I keep coming back to a car analogy. If you want to drive a car, you absolutely need to know how the steering wheel works, how to apply the brakes, and how to read the speedometer. If you ignore those basics, you will crash and die.
But the question is, do you need a PhD in thermodynamics and mechanical engineering to safely drive to the grocery store?
Right. You don't need to know how to rebuild a transmission blindfolded just to commute to work.
That car analogy perfectly encapsulates the author's stance. The text is absolutely not saying that all finance is bad or that math is irrelevant.
Right.
It explicitly states that understanding basic profits efficiency, managing cash flow, and understanding the difference between fixed and variable costs are vital survival skills. You have to know how to read the dashboard of your business.
But you don't need to be able to write the code for the engine's computer.
Exactly. Spreadsheet wizardry is a highly situational tool, not a foundational pillar. Think of it this way. If you do not understand the 5 core parts of a business, if you fail at value creation, if you ignore the iron law of the market, if you don't understand the core human drives, all the calculus-level quantitative analysis in the world will not save you.
It just won't work.
In fact, it's worse than useless because it might give you a false sense of mathematical confidence while your business drives straight off a cliff.
Honestly, for anyone listening who has ever felt intimidated by corporate jargon, this is such a massive relief. The ultimate practical takeaway from this section of the book is liberation.
Absolute liberation.
You are officially freed from certification intimidation. You have permission to be a highly successful entrepreneur, manager, or creator without mastering advanced financial modeling. You do not need a $150,000 piece of paper to validate your ability to create value in the world.
It gives you permission to stop worrying about what you don't know and focus your finite time, your willpower, and your energy exclusively on the economically valuable skills that actually move a business forward.
All right, we've covered an immense amount of ground today. We've torn down the myths of the MBA. We've built the 5 pillars of a repeatable process. We've explored the evolutionary drives of the human brain. And we've mapped the invisible systems that keep it all running.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. So if we have to distill this down, if we need one grand synthesis to walk away with, what is the soul of this chapter?
If we pull all these complex ideas together, the core insight of this entire framework is that business is not a magical gate-kept science. It has been wrapped in this intimidating academic veneer for decades to keep people out. But when you strip the jargon away, business is simply a repeatable, logical process. It's a mechanism where you create a form of value that connects deeply to a core human drive. You deliver that value reliably through a system that evolves over time, and you ensure the system brings in enough money to sustain itself. That is the entire secret hiding behind the ivy-covered walls.
It's just people and systems working together to solve a problem. It is profoundly empowering when you realize the barriers to entry are mostly psychological.
Absolutely.
But now that we've mapped out these foundational pillars, the natural question becomes, how do you actually execute that very first step? What does it look like to build value creation from scratch?
That is the crucial next step on the journey, because value doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It has to take a specific shape.
And that is exactly what we are going to explore in our next deep dive. We're going to break down the 12 standard forms of value. And we might just discover why the brilliant idea you've been struggling with in your garage for the past 6 months isn't actually a bad idea. It might just be packaged in the completely wrong format for the market to digest.
It's incredibly common to have identified the exact right value, but put it into the wrong vehicle.
We will unpack all of the mechanics behind that next time. But before we go, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to explore on your own this week.
Oh, I love these.
We've established that business is fundamentally just the intersection of human psychology and predictable systems. So to what extent are our own daily routines just businesses of one?
Wow.
Are you the CEO of a failing, heavily constrained system in your own personal life? And if you are, could applying the iron law of the market or the theory of constraints to your own daily habits completely rewrite your future? Think about it. We'll see you on the next deep dive. What if you poured, let's say, $100 million and 5 grueling years of your life into creating this revolutionary state-of-the-art product?
Right.
And then when you finally unveil it to the world, nobody cares. Like absolute silence.
It's just a complete nightmare.
It sounds like one of those theoretical, I don't know, business school scare tactics, the kind of thing they use to frighten first-year students. But it actually happens every single day in the real world.
Oh, all the time. Fortunes are just incinerated.
Yeah, marriages are strained, years of potential just wasted. And all because someone built this brilliant solution to a problem that, well, nobody actually had.
It really is the ultimate dread for any creator. I mean, you spend years in the proverbial garage, right?
Tinkering away.
Exactly. You build this perfect machine, you polish it, you finally open the doors to the public, and you're just met with deafening silence. It's a crushing psychological blow.
Because in your head, the value is so obvious.
Exactly. But the market completely disagreed.
Well, today, we are going to make sure that never happens to you. For this deep dive, we are unpacking a stack of notes and research centered around a core chapter in Josh Kaufman's celebrated book, The Personal MBA.
Specifically, the chapter titled Value Creation.
Yes. Our mission today is to totally demystify the core engine of any successful enterprise. We're breaking down why building a business is not about having a perfect idea in a vacuum.
Not at all.
It's actually this rigorous scientific process. You have to match what you create with hardwired human psychology and then validate that match against brutal reality before you go broke.
Which is such an incredibly vital skill set to develop. I mean, if you're listening to this and you're just a curious beginner trying to figure out how commerce actually works.
Or maybe you're prepping to launch a side hustle.
Right, or even if you're an experienced entrepreneur who just feels stuck, mastering the underlying mechanics of how and, more importantly, why humans value things, it's the ultimate leverage.
It takes you out of the realm of just guessing and hoping.
Exactly. It puts you into the realm of knowing. It transforms you into this highly effective creator who actually serves a living, breathing market.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Kaufman starts by zooming way, way out. He strips the whole concept of business down to its bare bones.
No jargon, no corporate speak.
Right. He argues that every single business on Earth, whether we're talking about a neighborhood lemonade stand or a trillion-dollar tech monopoly, is made up of 5 interdependent parts.
And if you remove even one of those parts, the whole organism just dies.
Yet you no longer have a business, you have a hobby. Or maybe a scam.
Basically, yeah.
So those 5 parts are value creation, marketing, sales, value delivery, and finance.
And it is so crucial to view those 5 parts as a strict sequence, chronological. Value creation is the absolute bedrock. It's step 1.
Because if you don't have that...
Right, you have to discover what people want or need and then bring it into existence. If you skip that step, the rest of the chain just collapses immediately.
Makes sense.
I mean, if you haven't created genuine value, you have nothing to market, which means nothing to sell, nothing to deliver.
And your finance department is just staring at a spreadsheet full of zeros.
Exactly. Kaufman has this great distillation. A business is a repeatable process that makes money. Everything else is a hobby.
So, like, if you spend your weekends knitting sweaters and giving them away to your family, that's a beautiful hobby.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a business.
No, it's not. To transition into the realm of business, you are forced to reckon with the market. And this brings us to this concept in the source material that sounds, honestly, a bit terrifying. The iron law of the market.
The iron law. It sounds terrifying because it is completely unforgiving.
It really is. The iron law basically states that a market that does not exist simply does not care how smart you are.
Wow.
Right. It doesn't care how hard you worked, how many all-nighters you pulled, or how much venture capital you raised.
The market is an immovable object.
Always. Neither a stellar team of geniuses nor a fantastic, technologically superior product can ever redeem a bad market. The market always, always wins.
This brings us right back to that opening nightmare scenario I mentioned. To ground this in reality, let's look at the Segway PT.
Oh, that is the perfect cautionary tale. Dean Keeman, the inventor of the Segway, he's not some naive amateur. The guy is a prolific, world-class genius.
Yeah, before the Segway, he invented the first wearable insulin pump.
Yes. And revolutionary water purification systems, highly advanced medical stents. The man understands engineering at a level most of us just can't even fathom.
Okay, so he decides to reinvent human transportation.
Right. He secures over $100 million in funding. He spends 5 years in absolute secrecy developing the Segway, this 2-wheeled, self-balancing electric scooter.
And the hype leading up to this launch was something we rarely see anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Steve Jobs reportedly said it would be as big a deal as the personal computer.
Which is massive praise.
Yeah, and John Doerr, the legendary venture capitalist, he predicted it would reach $1 billion in sales faster than any company in history.
The expectations were just stratospheric. Kamen himself claimed the Segway would replace the car the way the car replaced the horse and buggy.
They literally built factory capacity to pump out tens of thousands of units a month.
They did. And when it finally launched to the public in 2002, the company's conservative estimate was that they'd sell 50,000 units a year.
And what actually happened?
Over the next 5 years, not 1 year, but 5 whole years, they sold a grand total of roughly 23,000 units.
Ouch.
Yeah. It was an unmitigated commercial disaster.
Okay, I have to push back on the underlying premise here, though.
Yeah.
Doesn't a genuinely revolutionary product create its own market?
Well,
Like, it feels like we're dismissing the whole field of dreams concept, you know? If you build it, they will come. If we look at history, Henry Ford famously said that if he asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse.
sure, that's the classic quote.
And Steve Jobs didn't ask focus groups if they wanted an iPhone, right? He just built it. The Segway was undeniably brilliant technology. Shouldn't that brilliance have carved out a new market?
That is a very common pushback, and it highlights a really dangerous myth in entrepreneurship. Let's reframe that slightly. The field of dreams fallacy survives because of survivorship bias.
Okay, explain that.
We remember the iPhone. We forget the thousands of brilliant inventions that died in total obscurity. The technology of the Segway was a marvel. The self-balancing gyroscopes, the dynamic stabilization, it was breathtaking engineering.
Right.
But that is exactly Kaufman's point. Brilliant engineering does not equate to market demand.
So where did the Segway go wrong in terms of the iron law?
Well, the iPhone succeeded not because it ignored the market, but because it perfectly served existing human desires. The desire to connect, to access information, to be entertained, and it just did it in a vastly superior way.
So the market for communication and entertainment was already massive.
Exactly. The Segway, on the other hand, required people to radically change their behavior for a very questionable payoff. The problem wasn't the design. The problem was the sociology and the economics.
Yeah.
Very few people woke up in the morning desperately wanting to spend $5,000 on a heavy, awkward device that made them look a bit silly, couldn't be driven on major roads, and was too bulky for the sidewalk.
Yeah, when you put it like that.
Right. Kamen engineered a perfect solution to a problem that urban commuters didn't actually feel they had. You cannot force a market to materialize just because the gyroscopes are cool.
That is a critical distinction. So the iPhone served an existing market with a new tool, while the Segway tried to invent a behavior that just didn't have an underlying market demand.
Precisely.
So the practical takeaway for you listening is that you absolutely must start by evaluating the market, not by falling in love with your product idea. You have to look before you leap.
And the source text actually provides a framework for this. It suggests evaluating any potential market across a variety of factors before you spend a single dime.
Right. And rather than just going through a mechanical checklist, it seems more useful to think about market evaluation as testing for 3 major categories of friction.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. First, you have to look at urgency and market size. Is this a burning problem for a large number of people right now?
Like if you're developing a new cancer screening technology, the urgency and market size are astronomical. People are actively, desperately looking for solutions.
Exactly. But if you're starting a business teaching, I don't know, underwater basket weaving, the urgency is 0 and the market size is microscopic.
The second category of friction seems to be about the economics of actually reaching those people. The text talks about the cost of customer acquisition and pricing potential.
Right, because you might have a product that millions of people want, but if it costs you $200 in advertising to acquire a single customer, and you can only charge that customer $50.
You don't have a business, you have a wealth destruction machine.
You really do. You have to consider how hard it is to get someone's attention. If you open a hot dog stand right outside a major football stadium, your customer acquisition cost is basically 0. The foot traffic is just built in.
But if you're selling enterprise software to government agencies, you might have to spend millions of dollars and wait 3 years just to get a meeting.
Exactly. And the third category is the reality of delivery. Speed to market, upfront investment, and the cost of value delivery. Basically, how much time and capital do you have to risk before you can hand the solution to the customer?
This is where a lot of software and digital businesses have a massive advantage over physical manufacturing.
Oh, huge advantage. If I write an ebook on productivity, my upfront investment is just my time, and my cost of value delivery is 0. A digital file is copied infinitely for free.
But if I want to compete with Tesla and build an electric car, I need billions in upfront capital to build a factory, secure raw materials, and navigate all these regulations before I can sell car number 1. So you run your idea through these filters. You look at urgency, market size, acquisition costs, delivery friction. If the idea requires massive upfront capital for a tiny, low-urgency market, you kill it.
You drop the idea and move on, no matter how much you love it.
But let's say you find an idea that passes the test. You've identified a hungry market. That brings us to a much deeper question. How do we actually know what a market wants?
This is where we have to leave spreadsheets behind and dive into evolutionary biology and human psychology.
Oh, I love this part.
Because a market is not some abstract economic construct. A market is simply a collection of human beings. And those human beings are driven by deep-seated, often totally unconscious biological imperatives.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if you ask someone why they bought something, they will give you a very logical, rational explanation. Right?
Always.
They'll talk about fuel efficiency or thread count or return on investment. But the source material suggests that those logical reasons are almost always just post-rationalizations for primal biological urges.
Exactly, and this is a major paradigm shift for most new entrepreneurs. Kaufman leans heavily on research conducted by Harvard Business School professors Paul Lawrence and Nitin Noria.
Right.
They studied human behavior through the lens of evolutionary biology and identified 4 core human drives that are just hardwired into our brains. Kaufman then adds a crucial 5th drive.
So if you want to understand commerce, you have to decode these 5 drives because they're basically the invisible puppet strings controlling every purchasing decision.
Yes. Let's explore these because once you see them, you literally cannot unsee them in the world around you.
Drive number 1 is the drive to acquire. This is the desire to obtain physical objects, but it goes much deeper than just hoarding food or shelter.
Right, much deeper. It is fundamentally about acquiring immaterial things like status, power, and influence. Think about our evolutionary past. In a hunter-gatherer tribe, the individual with the most resources and the highest status had the best chance of survival and reproduction.
And that drive hasn't vanished just because we have supermarkets now.
Not at all. When you look at luxury retailers, high-end investment brokerages, or even exclusive country clubs, they aren't just selling clothing or financial returns. They are selling the drive to acquire.
They're selling a signal to the rest of the tribe that says, I have status, I am powerful.
Exactly.
Drive number 2 is the drive to bond. We are a profoundly social species. We want to feel valued and loved. We want to form deep relationships, whether platonic or romantic. We just want to belong to a tribe.
Because if you are cast out of the tribe in the ancestral environment, you die. So the drive to bond is incredibly powerful. Obviously, dating apps tap directly into this.
Sure, that's the obvious one.
But so do coffee shops, social media networks, and massive music festivals, even things like cosmetics and fashion.
A lot of the beauty industry is built on the promise that if you use this product, you will be more attractive, more accepted, and more loved by your peers.
Absolutely.
Okay, drive number 3 is the drive to learn. Humans have an innate, insatiable desire to satisfy our curiosity and make sense of the world around us.
We are the ultimate tool-building species. Understanding our environment gives us an evolutionary edge. This drive powers the entire academic industry, book publishing, documentaries, and the endless array of online courses.
So when a company promises to make you more competent, more knowledgeable, or help you master a new skill, they're tapping into the drive to learn.
Spot on.
Drive number 4 is the drive to defend. We have a primal need to protect ourselves, our loved ones, our property, and our reputation from threats.
What's fascinating here is how broad the drive to defend actually is. Yes, it's home alarm systems and martial arts classes, but it is also the entire insurance industry.
Oh, that makes total sense.
Right. It's cybersecurity software. It's the legal profession. Any business that promises to keep you safe, prevent a loss, or shield you from a bad outcome is monetizing the drive to defend. They are essentially selling you the ability to quiet your amygdala, the fear center of your brain.
And then we have Kaufman's edition, the 5th drive. The drive to feel. We crave new sensory stimuli. We want intense emotional experiences, pleasure, excitement, anticipation, and entertainment.
A brain without stimulus falls into despair. We need to feel alive. This is the bedrock of the entire entertainment complex. Movies, video games, concerts, sporting events, even fine dining.
They don't necessarily give us status or keep us safe, but they thrill us.
Yeah, they give us a rush of dopamine or adrenaline.
So to put this into perspective, the text points out a fantastic example regarding higher education. Students don't take on hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to go to Harvard just to sit in a lecture hall and acquire information.
No, they don't.
If it was just about the drive to learn, they could get the exact same information by sitting in a public library reading textbooks for free or watching MIT lectures on YouTube.
Exactly. They are buying Harvard to satisfy the drive to acquire status. The degree is a permanent status signal to employers and society.
The learning is almost secondary to the signaling.
That is so true. And you can see this layering of drives in everyday objects, too. People don't buy a $20 tube of designer lipstick simply because they need red pigment on their face. You can get red pigment for 50 cents.
Right.
They buy the designer lipstick because they believe it will enhance their beauty, which targets the drive to bond, and perhaps it has a luxury logo on it, which targets the drive to acquire status.
I always think about this in the context of buying a car. If you live in a dense, paved city, and you go out and buy a massive, rugged, lifted 4x4 truck,
Yeah.
well, you are not buying that for logical reasons.
Definitely not.
If you evaluate it purely on efficacy or cost-like, getting from point A to point B, a used Honda Civic does the job infinitely better and cheaper.
Yeah, it does.
You buy the massive 4x4 because of how it makes you feel. You are buying the drive to feel adventurous, bold, and capable. And you're buying the drive to acquire status by intimidating other drivers on the road. The truck is just a delivery mechanism for those emotions.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, every single successful business on the planet ultimately sells some combination of money, status, power, love, knowledge, protection, pleasure, and excitement. Every single one.
But as I mentioned earlier, consumers don't like to admit this. We don't walk into a dealership and say, "Hi, I'd like to purchase some status and adventure today, please."
Right. We need a logical cover story.
Exactly. We need to justify the emotional purchase to our rational brains and, to our spouses.
And that is where the 9 economic values come in. These are the rational metrics we use to evaluate a purchase. Things like efficacy, like does it work? Speed, how fast does it work? Reliability, will it break? Ease of use, how much effort does it take? Cost, what do I have to give up to get it?
Flexibility, aesthetic appeal, emotion.
Yes. The consumer justifies the purchase by pointing to these economic values. I bought the giant truck because it's highly reliable and has great flexibility for carrying cargo, even if they never haul a single piece of wood in their life.
It's hilarious, but it's so true.
The brilliant entrepreneur understands both layers. You must build a product that satisfies the rational economic values, but you must market and position that product so that it strikes directly at one of the 5 core emotional drives.
So your practical takeaway here is that you have to brutally interrogate your own business idea. What core human drive are you actually serving?
Crucial question.
If you're building an app and you can't clearly articulate how it helps someone acquire status, bond with others, learn something valuable, defend themselves, or feel something exciting, well, drop the idea. You must sell the end result, not the features.
The classic marketing adage applies perfectly here. People don't buy a 1/4-inch drill bit because they have a deep desire to own a piece of twisted metal.
Right.
They buy it because they want a 1/4-inch hole in their wall. The hole is the end result. Everything else is just a feature.
And often the hole in the wall is just a step toward the real end result, right? Hanging a beautiful family photo which satisfies the drive to bond and the drive to feel a sense of home.
Yes. You have to keep asking why until you hit the biological bedrock.
Okay, so let's synthesize where we are in this journey. We have identified an attractive market with high urgency. We have decoded the primal human desire we are targeting. The next massive decision in Kaufman's framework is deciding the actual shape of the value you are going to create.
Right, because value isn't just a physical widget that you hand to someone in a cardboard box.
Far from it. This is where a lot of first-time creators get stuck. They think business means manufacturing a physical object.
Kaufman outlines standard forms of value, and it is incredibly liberating to realize you don't have to invent a new business model from scratch. You just have to choose the right vehicle for your value.
Rather than listing all of them out like a dictionary, let's group these forms into a few overarching categories, because it really reveals how modern commerce works. The first major category we could call the tangible and the time-bound. This includes products and services.
These are the oldest forms of value. A product is tangible. You take raw materials, you assemble a smartphone or bake a loaf of bread, and you sell it for more than the cost of the ingredients.
The beauty of a product is scalability. Once you design it, you can stamp out millions of them.
Exactly. A service, on the other hand, is trading your time and skill for money. A heart surgeon, a barber, a freelance graphic designer.
Services can be highly lucrative because they are personalized, but they are notoriously difficult to scale because you only have 24 hours in a day.
Right. You can't clone yourself.
The next category is what I would call the access models. This is where you aren't selling ownership. You are selling the right to use something. This includes shared resources and subscriptions.
Shared resources are fascinating. Think about a commercial gym. If you wanted to build a world-class gym in your basement, it would cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment. Very few people can afford that.
So an entrepreneur buys all the expensive equipment once and then charges 1,000 people $50 a month to access it.
The value is in sharing the capital cost. Museums, amusement parks, and even cloud computing servers operate on this exact model.
And subscriptions tie beautifully into that.
Yes. Subscriptions offer an ongoing benefit for a recurring fee. The holy grail for a subscription business is keeping the customer attrition rate, what we call churn, as close to 0 as possible. If you deliver consistent value, like a streaming service or software platform, the revenue becomes highly predictable.
Then there is a third category, which is arguably the most dominant force in the modern economy, the attention economy. This is what Kaufman calls audience aggregation.
This is a model that confuses a lot of consumers because the consumer isn't actually the customer.
Well, this is a great point.
In audience aggregation, you create something that captures the attention of a specific demographic. A broadcast television network creates a hit sitcom. A social media platform creates an addictive scrolling feed. A niche magazine writes about fly fishing.
You give this content away for free or very cheaply to gather a massive audience.
Right. And once you have their attention, you turn around and sell that attention to a third party, the advertiser. In this form of value, the audience is actually the product being sold.
It's the old saying, if you aren't paying for the product, you are the product.
Exactly. And the forms of value don't stop there. You have agency, where you act as a matchmaker between a buyer and a seller, like a real estate agent.
You have capital, where you provide money to a business in exchange for an ownership stake, which is the world of venture capital and the stock market.
You have insurance, where you take on the risk of a bad event happening in exchange for regular payments.
What I find so compelling here is the concept of perceived value. Kaufman makes the point that not all forms of value are created equal in the mind of the consumer, even if they solve the exact same problem. The golden rule seems to be, the less end-user effort required to get the desired result, the higher the perceived value.
This is the psychology of friction. Let's say you own a house with a large lawn. The desired end result is a manicured lawn. If I try to sell you a highly effective lawnmower, a product, I might be able to charge you $400 once.
But you still have to spend 2 hours every Saturday pushing the thing around in the heat.
Exactly. But if I offer a landscaping service where my crew magically appears every Friday and does the work for you, I can charge you $200 every single month. Over a few years, you will pay me thousands of dollars.
The end result is identical short grass.
But because I removed the effort, the physical exertion, and the time commitment from you, the perceived value skyrockets. People will almost always pay a premium to eliminate effort from their lives.
And you aren't limited to just picking one of these models. The text talks about modularity. You can snap these forms of value together like Lego blocks.
Oh, for sure.
Like a modern video game console is a tangible product you buy once, but to play online, you need a recurring subscription. And the dashboard of the console utilizes audience aggregation to sell advertising to game developers.
The most robust businesses layer multiple forms of value to create a highly defensible moat.
Let me play devil's advocate for a moment here. If I'm an aspiring creator looking at this menu of options, shouldn't I just be brutally pragmatic? If a subscription service with low effort yields the highest perceived value and recurring revenue, shouldn't I just build that regardless of what I actually care about?
Well,
Or, conversely, what if I have a deep passion for something obscure and I just want to follow my heart and change the world, even if the market seems small?
you're hitting on a tension that destroys a lot of potential businesses. Kaufman frames this as two massive traps: the mercenary rule and the crusader rule.
Let's examine the mercenary first.
The mercenary rule is a warning. Do not start a business just for the money alone. It sounds counterintuitive because isn't business about making money?
Yeah, that's what everyone thinks.
Yes, but building a business from scratch is akin to pushing a boulder up a jagged mountain. It will inevitably require exponentially more time, effort, stress, and resilience than you initially estimate. If the only fuel in your tank is the prospect of a financial payout somewhere in the distant future, you will run out of gas.
When the servers crash at 3 a.m. or a supplier goes bankrupt, the mercenary simply gives up.
Exactly. You have to find some aspect of the daily work, the problem you're solving, or the people you are serving that genuinely fascinates you. Fascination is the only sustainable fuel.
But then there's the other extreme, which can be just as dangerous, the crusader.
The crusader rule is the antidote to the follow your passion advice that gets thrown around so recklessly. The rule states, do not blindly follow a cause if there is no market willing to pay the bills.
Sometimes an entrepreneur becomes so obsessed with their vision, so convinced that the world needs their solution, that they completely ignore the iron law of the market.
And if there isn't a critical mass of people willing to trade their hard-earned money for your creation, you do not have a business. You have a side project, a hobby, or a charity. And there is nothing wrong with charities, but you have to be intellectually honest with yourself about what you are building.
You cannot change the world if you can't pay your rent.
The crusade ends the day you run out of cash.
It's all about navigating toward that sweet spot. You need the intersection between what endlessly fascinates you so you don't burn out like a mercenary and what actually has a proven paying market so you don't starve like a crusader.
Right.
And speaking of proven markets, there's a point in the text about competition that completely flips conventional wisdom on its head. I hear people all the time say, I had this great idea for an app, but I searched the App Store and 3 companies are already doing it, so the idea is ruined.
That reaction is driven by a fundamental misunderstanding of risk. When an entrepreneur sees competition, they feel demoralized. But Kaufman argues you should feel relieved. He calls it the hidden benefit of competition.
Relief. That's so counterintuitive.
I know, but if you see multiple businesses already operating in your space, fighting over customers, that is the best news you could possibly get. It proves, unequivocally, that a market of paying customers actually exists.
It validates the iron law of the market for you, for free.
Exactly. The highest risk in any new venture is the Dean Kamen segue risk, building something that literally nobody wants. If competitors exist, that risk is eliminated.
So you don't have to spend years and millions of dollars educating the public on why they need this type of product. The market is already educated.
Your job is no longer to invent a new human behavior. Your job is simply to study the competitors, buy their products, read their negative reviews, find out what they do poorly, and then engineer a modular offering that serves the existing market just a little bit better, or in a slightly different niche.
Okay, so let's recap the journey so far. We've evaluated the overarching market. We have pinpointed the deep evolutionary human drive we are going to serve. We have selected the shape of the value. Maybe it's a subscription software, maybe it's a high-end physical product, and we've avoided the mercenary and crusader traps.
On paper, we have a brilliant business plan.
But how do you know if this theoretical plan will actually survive contact with the real world? Because a spreadsheet is very patient. Reality is not.
This raises an incredibly important question, perhaps the most important question in the entire book. How do we test an idea in reality without risking personal bankruptcy? How do we prevent ourselves from becoming the next segue?
The answer lies in ruthlessly identifying your CIAs, your critically important assumptions.
Critically important assumptions, let's define that.
Every single business idea, no matter how well researched, is built on a foundation of assumptions. These are facts that must be true in the real world for your business model to function.
And if even one of these CIAs turns out to be false, the foundation crumbles and the entire business collapses. The tragedy of entrepreneurship is that founders are often psychologically blind to their own assumptions. They treat their guesses as hard facts.
Give me a concrete scenario so we can see how this plays out.
Let's use a very grounded example. Imagine you want to open a boutique yoga studio in your local neighborhood. You've noticed there aren't any nearby, and you personally love yoga. Your business plan looks great on paper, but what are the hidden CIAs?
Okay.
Assumption 1. People in this specific neighborhood actually want to do yoga. Assumption 2. They were willing to pay $25 a class for it. Assumption 3. They want to take classes on weekday evenings. Assumption 4. I can secure a commercial lease for under $3,000 a month.
Right, and if you are wrong about any of those, if the neighborhood prefers Pilates, or if they will only pay $10, or if the commercial real estate is too expensive, the math breaks and the studio goes under.
Exactly. So what does the traditional old-school entrepreneur do? They operate on blind faith. They sign a 5-year personal guarantee on a commercial lease. They take out a $75,000 bank loan. They buy the expensive flooring, hire the instructors, do a grand opening.
And pray their assumptions were right.
Yes. And if they were wrong, if nobody shows up, they don't just close a business, they have potentially ruined their financial life. Kaufman argues that this approach is absolute madness. You must test these assumptions using prototypes and what he calls the iteration cycle.
The iteration cycle. He uses the acronym WIGWAM for this, which sounds a bit goofy, but it's basically the scientific method applied to business, right? Watch, ideate, guess, which, act, measure.
Exactly. It's a structured loop. You watch what is happening in the market or with your prototype. You ideate possible solutions or improvements. You guess which of those ideas will have the most positive impact. You decide which specific change to test next. You act by making the change. And finally, you measure the results objectively.
To run this wigwam cycle effectively, you need speed. You can't spend 6 months building a perfect product for every test. You have to build a prototype.
And I understand prototyping a piece of software. You build a wireframe. But a yoga studio is a physical space. It's experiential. How on earth do you prototype a physical, location-based business without actually renting the space and building it?
This is where Kaufman introduces a concept that completely shifts how you view starting a business. It's called the MEVO, the Minimum Economically Viable Offer. And the way you test a MEV in the real world without risking your life savings is through a technique called shadow testing.
This concept blew my mind, but it also raised some serious red flags for me. Walk us through how you would shadow test that yoga studio.
To shadow test the yoga studio, you explicitly do not sign a lease. You don't buy a single yoga mat. Instead, you spend a weekend and $100 building a highly professional, beautifully designed website. You describe the vision for the studio in vivid detail. You list the neighborhood location you are targeting, you post a tentative schedule of classes, you write bios for the types of instructors you plan to hire, and you include architectural sketches or mood boards of what the space will look like.
You make it feel incredibly real.
And most importantly, at the top of the page, you put a big button that says Pre-order Foundation membership. And that button links to a checkout page that requires a valid credit card.
So you are asking people to pay real money for a membership to a building that currently does not exist.
Yes, you take another $100, you run some hyper-local social media ads targeting people within a 3-mile radius, you drive them to the website, and then you watch. You measure.
If 1,000 people in your neighborhood click on the ad, read the website, and exactly 0 people type in their credit card number, you have just learned something invaluable.
Your critically important assumptions were wrong. Either they don't want yoga, they don't like your price, or they don't like the schedule.
But wait, let's pause here. I have to push back hard on this. Shadow testing sounds highly deceptive. If I'm a consumer and I put my credit card into a website for a local business, I expect that business to be real.
Sure.
If I find out it was just a test, I'm going to feel bait and switched. As a founder, aren't you instantly destroying your brand reputation in your own neighborhood? People will go on local Facebook groups and call you a scammer.
That is the exact pushback every ethical person has when they first hear about shadow testing, and it's why the execution requires extreme care and transparency. It is absolutely not a scam, and it is not theft because of how you frame the transaction.
How so?
You must be explicitly clear on the checkout page that they are pre-ordering a membership for a studio that is currently in development. You use language like, help us bring this studio to life. If we reach our goal of 100 founding members by the end of the month, we will open our doors. Your card will be authorized, but you will not be charged if we don't hit our goal.
Ah, okay. So it's essentially running your own localized Kickstarter campaign.
Precisely. Kickstarter is just a giant platform for shadow testing MEVOs. And here is the ethical safeguard. If the test fails, if you only get 3 signups, you immediately void the credit card authorizations.
So they don't get charged.
Right. You send a deeply appreciative, polite email saying, thank you so much for your support, but unfortunately, we didn't get quite enough community backing to justify opening the physical space right now. Your card has not been charged, and we are so grateful for your early belief in us.
So nobody loses a dime.
Nobody loses a dime. You haven't stolen anything.
Yeah.
But what you have gained is the ultimate unvarnished truth of the market. Because there is a massive canyon-sized difference between expressed preference and revealed preference.
Explain that difference, because I think that's the trap most founders fall into.
Expressed preference is what people say they will do. If you walk around your neighborhood and ask your friends, hey, if I open a yoga studio, would you come? Everyone will say, oh, absolutely, that sounds amazing, I'd totally go.
They say that because humans are polite. They don't want to hurt your feelings.
Exactly. That is expressed preference, and it is a terrible data point to build a business on. Revealed preference, however, is what people actually do when they have to give up resources. When a stranger on the internet takes out their wallet, types in a 16-digit credit card number, and clicks pay, that is revealed preference.
Feedback is cheap, but paid in full orders are the truth.
That's the mantra. Shadow testing forces the market to put its money where its mouth is. It saves you from the false positive of polite friends, and consider the alternative scenario. What if you run the shadow test, and within 48 hours, 200 people pre-order a membership?
Then you have an incredible amount of validation.
Not just validation, you have cash flow. You can now walk into the bank or the commercial real estate office with a list of 200 paying customers. You can sign that scary 5-year lease with near zero stress because you aren't guessing anymore. You know for a verified mathematical fact that the market is there.
That is profound. It's about iteration velocity. Moving through that wigwam cycle as fast and as cheaply as possible. You build the mayo, you shadow test it, you validate your critically important assumptions with real dollars before you commit real capital.
So let's look at the next phase. Let's say you've successfully validated your BO. You have paying customers. You are officially in business. The challenge now shifts. How do you optimize the offering? How do you figure out what to improve next without ruining what already works?
The default instinct for almost every corporate manager or new founder is to run a focus group, send out a massive survey, get a bunch of customers in a conference room, give them bad coffee, and ask them what they want you to add to the product.
But Kaufman argues that traditional focus groups are essentially worse than useless. They are actively misleading.
They are deeply misleading because of a quirk in human psychology. When human beings are asked what they want in a vacuum, without having to bear the cost of those desires, they will invariably demand everything. They want infinite features for $0. Kaufman uses a brilliant hypothetical example of a diner to illustrate this.
Right, the diner example. Let's walk through this because it perfectly illustrates the absurdity of surveys.
Imagine you own a diner and you hand your customers a survey asking them to rate how important certain factors are on a scale of 1 to 10. They will fill it out and tell you that they want their food delivered to the table in under 5 minutes. They want the decor to look like a 5-star luxury hotel. They want a menu that has 300 different highly customized options, and they want the entire meal to cost less than $15.
Which is a mathematical impossibility. You cannot run a Michelin-star dining room with an endless menu and microwave speed for $15. You'd be bankrupt by Tuesday.
Exactly. When people do not have to make trade-offs, they want it all. So if you, as the business owner, take that focus group data back to your office and try to build what they asked for, you will destroy your company trying to deliver miracles.
It's like the old joke contractors use when talking to clients. You can have it fast, you can have it cheap, or you can have it good. Pick two.
Yeah.
The focus group is demanding all three. You have to force the customer to reveal which constraints they actually care about.
Precisely. And the methodology Kaufman introduces to solve this is called relative importance testing. Instead of asking customers to rate individual features on a scale from 1 to 10, you present them with distinct, constrained choices that force a trade-off.
So in the context of the diner, how would you structure that question?
Instead of asking how important is speed, you ask, would you rather have option A, a very limited menu of 5 items but your food arrives in 5 minutes? Or option B, a massive menu of 50 items, but your food takes 30 minutes to arrive.
That forces them to weigh the value of time against the value of choice.
Yes. Or you ask, would you rather have option C, beautiful, luxurious decor with crystal glasses, but entrees cost $30? Or option D, very basic plastic tables and paper napkins, but entrees cost $10.
By forcing the customer to make a choice between mutually exclusive options, you discover their true priorities. You discover if your specific market segment cares more about speed or variety, more about aesthetics or cost.
And once you uncover what they truly value, you can begin to improve the business. But the text warns against making massive overhauls. It advocates for a strategy called incremental augmentation.
Incremental augmentation is the discipline of improving your offering through very small, tightly controlled, tested increments rather than unveiling massive, sweeping version 2.0 overhauls.
Because if you redesign the entire restaurant overnight, change the menu, change the decor, change the prices, and suddenly your sales drop by 30%, you have absolutely no idea which of the 10 changes caused the revolt.
Exactly. You risk breaking a complex system that was already working. By making one small change at a time, maybe adding one single new dessert to the menu, or tweaking the price of one popular item by 50 cents, you can measure the exact, isolated impact of that specific change.
It brings us right back to the wigwam iteration cycle. You act on one variable, you measure the result. If it works, you keep it. If it fails, you roll it back. Measure, adjust, measure, adjust.
And while you are in the trenches making these micro-adjustments, Kaufman stresses the absolute necessity of field testing. This means you have to be your own most demanding, unforgiving customer. You have to routinely use your own product in the real world.
It sounds obvious, but it is shocking how many executives and founders become completely disconnected from the actual user experience. They look at dashboards and spreadsheets, but they never actually try to navigate their own company's automated phone tree. They never try to cancel their own subscription through the standard customer service portal.
It's the undercover boss phenomenon. The CEO is always horrified when they see how broken the actual frontline processes are.
Field testing prevents that rot from setting in. If the packaging on your product is infuriating to open, you need to experience that frustration firsthand. If your software requires too many clicks to achieve a simple task, you need to feel that annoyance. Because if the experience annoys you, the person who deeply loves the company, it is absolutely enraging your customers.
Field testing keeps you violently grounded. in the reality of what you are actually delivering, not the idealized version of what you think you are delivering.
That's so true.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of intellectual terrain today. We've gone from the macro laws of the market down to the micro level of shadow testing and forced trade-offs. To synthesize all of this, if we have to distill the soul of this chapter into one core insight, what is the single most important paradigm shift the listener needs to walk away with?
If there is one overarching truth that ties all these frameworks together, it is this. Value creation is not a mystical lightning bolt act of divine genius. The prevailing cultural myth is that entrepreneurship is about locking yourself in a garage for years, waiting for a muse to grant you an epiphany.
That is a recipe for building a segue.
True value creation is a systematic, rigorous, and repeatable process of deep empathy combined with cold, hard scientific testing.
Empathy and science. I think that perfectly encapsulates it.
You must start with empathy. You look at the market and you identify a deep, primal human drive, the desperate need to bond, the hunger to acquire status, the instinct to feel safe. You empathize with that need. Then, you wrap a solution to that need in a standard form of value, a tangible product, a shared resource, a subscription.
And once you have that hypothesis, you apply the scientific method. You ruthlessly identify your hidden assumptions, you build a minimum viable offer, and you shadow test it against reality until your audience literally pulls out their credit cards to prove you are right.
It completely reframes the concept of risk. It takes the existential terror out of entrepreneurship. You aren't taking wild, blind leaps of faith anymore. You are taking small, calculated steps, measuring the ground beneath your feet every time.
But creating genuine value is only half the battle. Because once you've built something incredible and you have validated that a small pocket of the market desperately wants it, you face a new existential threat: obscurity. How do you get a massive, noisy, perpetually distracted world to actually pay attention to what you've built? That brings us to the complex art of marketing, which is exactly what we'll be tackling in our next deep dive.
And before you take your headphones off or go to sleep tonight, I want to leave you with a practical assignment, a final thought to mull over. Look around your house or your office and find the last non-essential item you purchased. Maybe it's an expensive watch, a new video game console, or a high-end specialty coffee maker. Look closely at it and ask yourself, what deep evolutionary human drive was I really trying to satisfy when I swiped my card for this? Was it status? Was it comfort? Was it stimulation?
And secondly, what was the critically important assumption the business had to make and validate in order to get my money?
I promise you, once you start analyzing the world through this lens of drives and assumptions, you will never be able to unsee the matrix of commerce again.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.